Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us for the August 18th, 2020 Brattleboro Selectboard meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 6:17 p.m. Eastern Time. Our first order of business is to approve the minutes of August 4th in this case.
I move to approve the minutes of August 4th, 2020.
Thank you, Ian. Ian has moved to approve the minutes of August 4th, 2020. All those in favor say aye and raise your hand. Board members?
Aye.
Aye. And that's 5-0. Thank you. I don't have any chair's remarks, except I guess it's just a simple remark. I was just struck at how horrible it was for me to walk inside on a day like today. I think we can all agree that this is one of those absolutely perfect Vermont August days. So let's take it outside. Come on. No, we won't do that. We have important business to do, but let's all celebrate that we're having a run of wonderful weather, and it's something we can all enjoy together once the meeting is concluded. Manager's comments is next. I'm going to put Peter Elwell on the spot.
I don't have any comments outside of the agenda items this evening, other than just to confirm for the record that the meeting was properly warned.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, that was Peter's polite way of reminding me that I forgot to ask him that important question. Appreciate that. Other select board members, comments or committee reports? I saw Liz's hand go up almost immediately, and then Daniel. Go ahead, Liz.
Thank you. Let me read the remarks that Senator Mazie Hirono posted today. Today marks 100 years since the United States ratified the 19th Amendment, making voting a right regardless of sex. It took much longer for women of color to be allowed to vote, barriers we still face a century later. The fight for equality isn't over, we march on.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Daniel?
Less inspiring, but no less important. Maybe less important, actually. So the Traffic Safety Committee meets on Thursday at 8 a.m. So if you have traffic safety type things on your mind, Brandy, you might want to join us. Thursday, 8 a.m. on this platform, I guess?
Actually, we'll be on GoToMeeting.
Okay, good to know.
Yep.
And you can find the agenda on the town website?
You can, and I'm going to double check that and make sure that I haven't misspoken, but I believe that one is on GoToMeeting.
Okay. And then one other thing that I wanted to say, last meeting, I mentioned that there is a utility arrears program in the works. And I checked the Public Service Department's website late this afternoon, and it does appear to be up and running. So if you are a person in Vermont, whether residential or non-residential, and have arrears for a Vermont-based utility, regulated utility, that were occurred because of impacts caused by COVID-19, you can apply for grants to help you get out from under those arrears. So you go to publicservice.vermont.gov and fill out the form.
Thank you, Daniel.
And if it's okay, I will confirm that it is GoToMeeting on Thursday morning at 8 a.m. If for those folks who have been to one of the prior Traffic Safety Committee meetings on GoToMeeting, it'll be the same link. And for anyone else, you can find it on the town's website, that and the agenda and the materials for the meeting.
Terrific. Thank you, Peter. Any other board members? Any comments, committee reports? Okay, seeing none. Our next item on our agenda traditionally is public participation. And this, again, is those moments where you'd like to say something, possibly ask a question. We have limited abilities to answer questions, but we take a shot at it sometimes. Or make a comment about something that's not on our agenda tonight. You'll see that we have a fairly full agenda with a big piece of unfinished business and a good slew of new business as well. But as always, we're going to welcome public participation. And to do so, you would make use of the, if you click on the participants button on your lower, right at the center of the screen, you'll see participants come up, and that will also give you the ability to raise your hand. And it's a nice feature that allows us to queue up people who do want to speak, and I can see the order in which they raise their hands. So I do see somebody has raised their hand, a person named Benjamin Mcallan, and I'm assuming that perhaps this person has something for public participation, so I'm going to go ahead and ask Patrick. Okay.
Cool. Thanks.
Wow. Okay. Well, that was
I feel like that
interesting.
sometimes. Sometimes I feel like that. in
Yeah,
2020.
sort of a primal scream thing. I've done some research back in the day about that therapy that used to be popular. Kurt Dimes also has his hand up, and I'm hoping that he's going
Come
to
on,
be
Kurt, do us proud.
a little more articulate, please, Kurt. Are you there?
I'm here and I'm trying to unmute and do all that stuff.
All right.
There we are.
We can see
Thank you so
and
much
hear
for
you.
your patience.
Welcome.
I would like to propose that the board should put on its agenda the Brattleboro Common Sense Safe Policing Initiative. I bet you've read the proposal that I sent, and I think the people listening would be very interested to know that this is a very simple plan for disarming the police and letting them practice safe policing according to the models, or according to one of the models of several nations like the UK and New Zealand, who practice weaponless patrols. New Zealand, for instance, has experimented with full carrying, that is, having weapons on their police officers all the time, and then having them only in their cars, and then having special trainings. England has patrols by their bobbies regularly without any lethal weapons, and they have specially trained officers when danger is expected. We have a new plan for conversations with officers who have experience with weaponless policing. Our collaborator, our researcher, Heather Urquhart, may be along to answer your questions about that. She's arranging conversations with Scottish officers, and they are eager to help. So they will be ready to talk to our officers or to any of you on the select board or the people in the committee. As I was saying, it's a simple plan. We've been working on it and negotiating with the chief since 2017. It's very surprisingly cheap plan, reasonably low cost plan, and unfortunately our economist Adam Marchesso couldn't make it to the meeting tonight. He will be forwarding to you a economic analysis, and this is it's all very simple and ready to go. We hope that you can get it onto your agenda for a separate vote, because we don't want it to slow down or rush the committee forming. And if you can see what a great idea it is, Brattleboro being a safe place for police, at least, then you can start it. And the initial pilot program, which would be in effect for 6 months, could be running while the committee is being completed and while the committee is being formed. So they can hit the ground running and take over the administration of the plan. Administration sounds rather more complicated than it is. And they can help Training for Transformation do the design of the de-escalation training at the end of the trial period. And the trial period is actually not such a big deal either, because Brattleboro Police regularly do weaponless, not weaponless patrols, they do a patrol downtown, each officer 1 hour per shift. And that downtown foot patrol could be subsumed under the trial period in a manner without weapons. So this is a ready to go plan, and I hope you can institute it while the committee is being formed quickly and in a manner that's urgent, because it is about Black lives, and a quick action would be very respectful to Black lives. Thank you.
Thanks, Kurt.
You're welcome.
We did receive a letter to that effect, so should no other board member get back to you, I will promise to get back to you within a few days about our next steps on that. Heather is next in the queue. I should remind people to please try to keep your comments to 2 minutes so that we can move our meeting along. Heather, are you able to bring up your camera?
Yep.
Hi.
Hiya. Yeah, I won't add too much to that. I'm a researcher with Brattleboro Common Sense.
I'm sorry. We can't quite hear you. Could you
Can you
just
hear me now?
Yes, just be a little closer to your microphone, perhaps.
Okay. I'm a researcher with Brattleboro Common Sense based in Scotland, and I've been working on the Safe Policing project, and part of what I've been doing has been building up a network of retired officers here with far superior expertise and knowledge on the policing context in the UK to myself, who are interested in contributing to discussions with officers in America. And we've sourced 25 officers across Scotland who have experience patrolling with and without firearms. And you know, while they recognise that the threat of firearm violence towards police in the UK is different, they still have experience navigating the threat of violence with and without firearms. And yeah, we're proposing these conversations as a easy early first step for Brattleboro Police Department to consider adopting, because they would offer police officers in Brattleboro the opportunity to participate in conversations on policing that build from a foundation of professional understanding, and they would allow the department to illustrate an openness to working towards safer modes of policing and learn about other cultures of policing in the as well. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Heather. If you're calling from Scotland, it must be quite late there. So thanks for joining us. Okay, folks, just remember this is public participation. We do have quite a bit of business to do, but you're welcome. Hannah is up next. Hi, Hannah.
Hi. Sorry, first one. I'm also a researcher with Brattleboro Common Sense, and I just had a quick comment that I wanted to add on to what Heather said and a little bit of what Kurt said as well. I just wanted to point out that there are also a lot of often ignored costs associated with police use of force, particularly in the form of settlements and court judgments and police misconduct cases. Just an example, within the past few years, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Betty Jones circumstance. She was a 55-year-old woman who was fatally shot by a police officer after he opened fire at a teenager who was standing in front of her. Her family in 2018 successfully sued the city of Chicago for $16 million. That's just one example. It's very common. Large settlement claims such as this do have the capacity to bankrupt small towns. And basically just the average cost of settlements and court judgments, they could be significantly lower if firearms aren't a tool in a police officer's arsenal. As it's pretty obvious, the potential damages are just significantly less severe or imminently less severe, if that makes sense. Yeah, that was my only comment.
Okay, Where are you from, Heather? Hannah, sorry.
Yeah, it's fine. That's common regardless. I'm from Vermont.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
I should say calling from, that's really my interest. There's possibly an organization name up next. I would ask you to identify yourself as a person. Train for Transformation. You're welcome to join us. Hi.
Hello, are you able to hear me okay?
Very soft.
A little quiet.
Is this any better?
Yeah.
Yes, much better. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. My apologies. I tried to change my name and I wasn't able to do so. So thank you for bearing with me. My name is Brandon Lee. And while I am calling from the Zoom, which is attached to our business, Training for Transformation, I am a graduate of the School for International Training, along with my partner, where we developed a lot of our skills. And because our name was mentioned, I did want to introduce ourselves in the name of transparency and solidarity. And so just a couple of bullet points about what we do. There was an attorney that proposed a concept referred to as police community integrated training and education. And this was to a conference at Vermont Law. And in his presentation or proposal, he highlighted our community conscious policing platform as like a prime example. And so we are one who lead with lived experience. We bring educational and professional experience as well. We do quite a bit of work here in Oregon, but we also maintain roots in Vermont. And so today, I just wanted to make sure you all know who I was, that we're available to support in any way that we can. And for the sake of time, you can find out more about us at T4TsavesLives.com. And to all my comrades in Vermont, it's great to see you again and to be in fellowship with you.
What was your name one more time?
My name is Brandon Lee, L-E-E, for the record.
Thank you very much.
You got it.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you for your time.
All right. So that was our public participation. And if no one has any objections on the board, we're going to move right through liquor commissioners and water and sewer commissioners. We don't have anything pending for those duties tonight. We're going to go right to unfinished business, which is once again discussing an RFP, request for proposals, for a facilitator of a community safety review committee. Peter is going to kick us off and let us know probably that he's been pretty busy this past week.
Thank you. In the backup materials for the meeting that were posted to the website last Friday, there's a memorandum from me to you dated August 14th, and attached to that are both a version of the RFP that shows the changes that I have made at the end of the last select board meeting where this topic was addressed. The select board asked me to do some editing. I'm going to describe that editing in a minute, but I first wanted to just let folks know what's available in terms of the documentation that the public has seen and that you've had an opportunity to review. So there's two separate versions of the RFP as it is before you tonight that are in the backup materials. One of them is shows the strikeouts of the things that have been deleted and an underline for things that have been added, so that it is clear to see the changes. Since this is, I had a limited scope of responsibility in making some changes here that I'll describe in a moment. It was important, I thought, for it to be easy for you, particularly in your decision making, but also for the community based on the significant degree of engagement that has been has characterized this work between the community and the select board over the last 6 to 8 weeks. So I wanted that to be transparent, but then also for you to be able to see and the public to be able to see the document in its current form, free of those strikeouts and underlines, so that it's a cleaner, easier read to see what the current content would be if you approved it this evening to go out on the street. That's also attached to this material. Speaking to the changes that have been made since the last time that you were reviewing this 2 weeks ago, the scope of those changes address the legality of the document in terms of certain aspects of what was contained in the document that speaks to processes that are governed by state law or the town charter or some other legal structure that needed to be reflected in here, so that if you do approve this, we'd be able to proceed as it's written and be in full compliance with the applicable laws. So in that regard, I've not only done editing myself, but have also reviewed the document with Bob Fisher. And if you do have questions that are specific to the legal aspects of this, Bob is in the meeting and would be available to answer those. So we do believe that the document is ready to be issued in this form and is legally proper. There's some formatting, some procedural things just to make it conform to town processes so that it would be, for instance, the description of how you would appoint members to the committee has been made to reflect how those processes are conducted by the select board and the operation of town business. The timeline, we spoke very explicitly last time about the work needed to focus on a deadline. The initial work that would be done by the facilitator and the committee would need to be done by December 31st for you to be able to consider the results of that work in January before you finalize your budget and the warning for representative town meeting to send on for representative town meeting consideration in March. So there was some adjustment to the timeline that had been previously proposed that was necessary just to make that work properly. There were places where the select board's authority needed to be made more clear so that it was set forth in the document, properly reflecting things that are, and this is kind of overlap with the legal part of this, but specific to the role of the select board. There are certain aspects of this that are the select board's, not just within the select board's authority, but are actually the select board's responsibility or obligation. If there is an action of a certain type to be taken, some of those actions as set forth in here can only be taken by the select board, can't be taken by others under Vermont law or the town's charter. And so, so the document, I've attempted to make the document speak more clearly to that, to what is the role of the select board and the actions that would be specifically and only taken by the select board in furtherance of this effort. And finally, there was some discussion about language in the prior draft that spoke to excluding certain folks from certain parts of the proceedings. And so I've attempted, as I said I would, to go to those sections and either make the language more inclusive or eliminate language that was creating an exclusion. I believe that those 5 objectives of this phase of the editing, as I've just described it, and as it was set forth in this August 14th memo, reflect the direction that the select board provided to me at the end of the last meeting 2 weeks ago. And when I had completed that work, as I said I would during that meeting, during the final moments of that meeting, and we were talking about the next steps in this process, I did reach out for members of the group who had drafted the proposal that had been submitted, part of that collaborative community effort that provided the document that you were reviewing 2 weeks ago, and had the opportunity last Thursday evening to meet with 5 of the members of that group to go over very thoroughly, section by section and line by line, the document in its edited form as it is before you tonight. And there were a few final tweaks that came out of that conversation, and I finalized that Friday morning and distributed to you for this meeting. And there also is one item that I called out in the memorandum that I believe you'll hear from the community about this evening, where we had a very long, very good, clear, rich conversation with some different perspectives around the composition of the committee, the advisory committee that the process calls for, and the scope of the potential changes that we discussed in that meeting on Thursday evening, I thought extended well beyond the scope of what I had described and you had accepted and directed me to undertake in terms of the scope of my review and my advice to you. And so the place that I landed with the members of the community in that discussion was that on that particular matter, which is paragraph 4 of, I believe, the process. Yes, paragraph 4 of the process overview section is what speaks to the composition of the advisory committee. I'm expecting that there will be members of the community who will want to address you at least on that topic this evening and possibly on other aspects of the document as well. I guess I should wrap up by saying, in addition to, of course, being available to answer questions for you or for the public, if that's going to be helpful in the discussion, my recommendation to you this evening is that once you have been able to discuss the document and among yourselves as well as with the community members and come to a decision point, if you're able to come to a decision point about moving forward this evening, I recommend that you do approve the RFP either as it is in front of you or as you may amend it tonight, and authorize that staff proceed with the RFP process, publish it, and solicit the proposals from facilitators. And simultaneous with that, that you authorize us to seek applicants, to publish to the community the invitation to apply to become a member of the advisory committee, so that you would be in a position that the deadline that's proposed for submissions in response to the RFP is September 8th, so that you would be able to consider the question of appointing a facilitator at the September 15th select board meeting. And if you do agree to that schedule, my recommendation to you that we follow that same schedule, same deadline, and the same appointment item for the September 15th, have a pair of items on the September 15th agenda where you would consider the selection of a facilitator as well as the appointment of members to the advisory committee, so that the work can then begin.
What was that date again, Peter?
September 8th is the proposed deadline for the submittal of proposals or applications in the case of the committee for consideration at the September 15th select board meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a quick process question.
Sure. I was just going to bring up process.
Thanks. If we say we get, a number of applicants, would that be discussed in executive session first and then discussed in public, as it's like kind of employing somebody, or not?
It can be. What you usually do with appointments to committees is interview before the meeting folks who have applied for those appointments, and then sometimes you have held executive sessions and sometimes not around the actual appointment decisions that you need to make. You are able to hold executive session to consider appointments to advisory committees.
And the facilitator, that?
I guess I'd seek Bob's input on that, possibly under contracts. You are allowed to discuss contracts in executive session. I don't know whether that would cover the discussion related to different proposals.
There's Bob.
Fill us in, Bob.
There we go, just unmuting myself.
Good timing.
If it gets down to the contractual matters, Peter is correct. We can go into executive session on that. And then you also sometimes, when you're appointing folks to committees, could also go into more of a deliberative session if you're trying to weigh between different people. But I would think some of that's going to get down to contractual matters, and that is an item for which the board can go into executive session. So I think you'd play that a little bit by ear as the facts present themselves when that time comes up, but it is an option. I guess I'd leave it at that.
Thanks.
Okay.
I don't understand I don't understand why we could go into deliberative session for appointing committee members. It doesn't seem to be either of the executive session require, like it's either for a contract or for a matter that could, prejudice someone if the greater public knew. So I don't really understand that second one. Can you elaborate a little, Bob?
Yes, I think some of that may boil down to looking at the proposed contracts that may come with these proposals. And so if we're having to look at the details of contracts and how that is going to work, that portion of it would be perhaps an executive session. I say perhaps because you don't have to do it in executive session by any means. But I think what you're getting at, Ian, is that the process of interviewing, that process has generally been an open session. I'm just saying it is an option if we get into having different proposals that have different contractual matters for which the board may want to seek legal advice. That type of an issue could go into executive session.
Okay, thank you very much.
I feel like I derailed us a little bit. It just, as Peter was talking, it kind of occurred to me that I wasn't really clear on how that all would work out. And I know that, you know, it's always preferable for us to do almost everything out in public. But I was just thinking about, you know, like, it's sort of like hiring somebody, and yeah, I wasn't sure.
Right. Sounds like a lot of that will be at the board's discretion, and I'm sure most of us want to lean towards open considerations and open discussions about these things whenever possible. I hadn't even thought of that, so thank you, Daniel. My process stuff was more about tonight's meeting, and to think about a little bit, well, to just ask, I definitely think that getting initial impressions from the 5 board members is the way to go, straight off the bat. And I wanted to just throw out there that it would be wonderful if we could focus on this actual document, because as you all know, it's taken us a long time to get to this document. I would love to try to keep the comments, the topics right in the document itself, and come out of this meeting with an approved RFP.
Can I lend my disembodied voice? My camera was turned off by Patrick. I don't know why that happened. Thank you.
Well, maybe you have displeased Patrick.
Maybe it's the shirt.
Oh my God.
I'll tell you about the shirt later, Brandy. It's all right.
So what was I saying? So anyway, we take this traditional break at, well, right about 8 p.m. And boy, I would love to have an approved RFP by 8 p.m. That gives us over an hour to kick this around. And I'm feeling a groundswell of excitement about getting this done and moving forward. And hopefully that's not just in my head. So that's my hopes and dreams, as the kids say. Liz?
Well, I wanted to thank Peter for his hard work on this RFP. And I too am getting excited about reaching a conclusion this evening. I wanted to thank the members of this consortium for coming forward with their insights. In review of the document, I see that there's ample discussion about witness testimony of harm. I think that's a great thing. I see that there's a lot of talk about the relationship between social service agencies and the police department. That's great. And the whole public safety issue. I am less clear, because I think it is much less explicit, that this document reflects the promise that the select board made to the people of Brattleboro to examine police policies, practices, and budget. And therefore, I have one edit to suggest to my select board members. Under process overview, item number 1, I'd like to add a sentence which reads, "This will include an examination of the Brattleboro Police Department policies, practices, and budget according to national anti-racist criteria." And I'm very excited about reaching a conclusion tonight, so I'm anxious to hear what my fellow board members think.
Do you want to, oh, that's fine, Liz, thank you for that. Jumping in, and a definite suggestion on adding something. Could I just ask for clarity? Did you say budget or budget and policies somewhere in there? I couldn't get the
Liz,
whole.
can you actually just repeat the full edit?
Yeah, I couldn't get it.
Oh, sure. You can hear me all right, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, just, I was trying to write and please.
I think I just closed it out, but here we go.
That was optimistic.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, here we are. Under process overview, item number 1, adding a sentence to the end of the paragraph that says, well, the previous sentence says, the scope will include community desires, needs, and report of harm experienced, a review of current systems and providers, and recommendations for how to utilize our town resources to ensure equitable community health, wellness, and safety. And the part that I'd like to add is, this will include a review of Brattleboro Police Department policies, practices, and budget according to national anti-racist criteria. Which, as I said, is consistent with the promise we made oh so many weeks ago.
Okay, thanks, Liz. Would you prefer that we address your point first, or should we go around first and get overall impressions, or what do you think we should do there, Liz?
I think if people's overall impressions can include their response to my edit, that would be expeditious.
Yeah, sure. Anyone want to jump forward?
Well, I had already raised my hand in the chat.
Oh, I did
but
see that.
That's okay. That was before Liz spoke. So I think if I can say first that I also am really excited. Thank you, Peter. I know you've had a lot going on, and I really appreciate you saying, here is the smallest window in the world, and I'm willing to jump through it, and people jumped through it with you, and I appreciate that. That was not lost on me. And so I'm glad to get your feedback on how you think the process went, and I'm anxious to hear the community's feedback and, you know, what is it, letter of approval, seal of approval, so I can see their opinion on how the process went. And I very much like Tim would love to see this wrapped up by a solid 8 p.m. Liz, to your point, my only concern is which, you know, there's a couple national race agendas addressing that, and my only thing is which one is more suitable, which one are we, you know, lining up behind? Because the one we first lined up behind, which was nobody's fault in this room because we didn't know it was going to go defunct. So, yeah.
So Campaign Zero is what I had originally discussed.
Right.
And an offshoot of theirs called 8 Can't Wait is the website that Campaign Zero apologized for. Campaign Zero has not apologized for their own Campaign Zero plan, which I think is great. People disagree with that for maybe confusing those 2 points. I'm not sure. I'm content with Campaign Zero. I'm also content with leaving it up to the committee themselves.
Cool.
But I think that Campaign Zero, if the board wants to stipulate Campaign Zero is a great anti-racist nationwide plan that would give us a clear indication of how Brattleboro Police Department is benchmarked across the nation.
Thank you very much for clearing that up for me. So I, like you, if the community people that are more experts think it's great, I'm totally down with lining up behind you on that. And like you said, if we can't agree and we want to leave it out, then I'm down with that too. So no immediate feelings of pushback, still excited to keep moving forward. And now I'm going to mute. Wait.
Yeah. Thanks, Brandy. Anyone else want to jump in with impressions and a response to Liz's suggested addition to process overview number 1.
Where you at, Daniel?
Oh, you spoke first. I can be patient.
Oh man. So yeah, I'll go. So I think first off, I want to thank Peter. I want to thank town staff. I want to thank the 5 individuals who put in a bunch of effort to work with Peter on it this week. I want to thank the people who spent the time to talk to me. I spoke with the community group twice on this, and I thought that those conversations were really helpful. I have a lot of excitement about this. I think that what Peter, the 5 individuals and town staff did was they moved the ball to a place where I really think that we can act on this tonight and move it forward. I do think that some people in the community are going to feel uncomfortable about some of the language that's in this RFP. And I want to go on the record and say that I think that's a good thing. I think that this process is going to be uncomfortable. And I think that people understanding that at the outset is critical for us to make real change in Brattleboro with this committee and with this review of community safety. I am really amazed at the work done here to maintain the integrity of the document while still maintaining its legality so that we can actually vote on it. As for Liz's suggestion, I have 2 thoughts. One would be just strike that last bit and say, this will include a review of the Brattleboro Police Department's police procedures and budget. And the idea being that the community group is going to use their lens to review it and present that review to the select board. My other thought would be that in parentheses, after consistent with national blah, 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 that it just say as will be determined by the committee and presented. Those would be my 2 thoughts on that. And then finally, I know, having spoken to some of the people in the community group, that there is going to be probably some criticisms of what the draft we're looking at right now. And I would really encourage people when they speak tonight to be very specific about what you want to look differently about what we're talking about tonight, so that we can move this forward. And yeah, that's where I'm at now. I'm excited.
Thanks, Ian. Do you want to go, Daniel, or do you want me to say a couple
I
things?
can go, yeah, sure. I want to pile on the thanks for everybody. I know that even the people that we've named thus far does not encompass all the people that have worked on this and all the people that have, rallied folks in the community and mobilized people to come to these meetings. And so, yeah, I'm really grateful for that. And I think that if I just landed here and looked at this proposal from the town of Brattleboro, I'm like, wow, this is a pretty amazing thing, and we know that the process has had its challenges, and I know that not everybody in the community group is 100% happy with what we have in front of us today, but I think that it is a really wonderful piece of work that many, many people have contributed to. To Liz's point, so, I hope that says, yes, I'm ready to move forward with this. I'm open to hearing some suggested edits, and we'll take them as they come. But right now, if we took a vote on this right here, I'd be all for it. With Liz's question about naming the police department, I do see the police department named kind of in the preamble. And I also see that, we're going to hire an anti-racist facilitator. We're going to use an anti-racist framework. So I think that that's going to speak to that. I worry about us kind of taking the onus away from community safety and having it be more of a police review. I know that that's where we started. right? I know that that's what we said we'd do, and it's kind of grown from that. And I think it's grown for the better. I would hope that whoever we hire and whoever we appoint to this committee will understand that a comprehensive review of community safety will certainly involve looking at the work of our police department. So I'm not going to fight over it too much. I mean, if people on this board want it in, then fine. If not, then I'm fine with that as well. I think we'll get what we want either way. And that's where I'm at.
Thanks, Daniel. Well, I'll go and I'll just pile on the praise. There, a lot of people need to be recognized. A lot of people who started from the very beginning and stuck with us the whole way. I can see your names in our participants list. And I really feel that it's just a wonderful thing when you see this kind of involvement in our meetings at all, and for such an important piece of business that we're doing. And especially thanks to our town manager and I think I heard the last 5 or whatever we call that, last group of people who worked very hard with him and some of the changes that had to happen because it has to happen within the Brattleboro Selectboard's purview. Let's just go overall at first. I don't know who said it. I think it was Peter who said that not everybody's going to be perfectly happy, and it's certainly the case, maybe with everyone, but certainly with me. And my discomfort also centers a little bit around language, and I really liked what Ian, you said. You know, it's okay, it's good to be uncomfortable. My discomfort or uncomfortness, no, that's not a word. But some of my discomfort comes from me wanting this to be a very successful process with this committee and with the facilitator that we choose. And some of the words, some of the phrases used need some explanation. And so that's mainly my point of discomfort. But I don't need this to be a perfect document. This is an RFP, and it's coming from a very real and important place. So I don't think it has to be perfect. It's hopefully forming a very good action, a very good process. And so that's what's really should be focused on, I think. I think to give an example, just so people don't think I'm just throwing words out, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but my confusion, I get a little confused when I see terms like new/decolonized systems. And again, I think it's okay to have in there, but I think it's a pretty, it's something that has to be explained to a lot of people because decolonization has meanings sociopolitically. It has sort of a new meaning that a lot of people aren't up to speed on. And a lot of people look at the document with some of these terms and say, I don't understand this. But again, I think that's okay. And I think as long as I'm understanding it pretty well, I think that's the important thing. I wanted to speak to Liz's point. I do think it's important to be very clear that we are going to be examining the police while also say we're examining community safety. And I think, Daniel, one parameter that has to be a little bit clear, and I think Liz's added wordage does this a little bit, is that when you say community safety, we do have to be, people should understand that there are agencies in this town that do very good work and that we don't have control over. So we can certainly have a lot of discussion about, for instance, how social service agencies that we have no control over interact with our police department, because we do have a say over how our police department interacts with agencies. But we do have to be careful to not overstep our bounds and pretend that we can direct what many of the social service agencies that do very good work in our town do directly. They can control that themselves. but certainly within our purview is the police, and how that interaction occurs is something that should be investigated, I think. And just finally, to just back up what Liz was trying to do, I think examining exactly what the police do now is going to be hugely valuable, because I think even the police, I know that even the police leadership in this town want people to better understand what they do, what happens when a call comes in that many people might think should be being handled by a different type of agency or a different type of person than an armed policeman, for instance. We need to understand that before the committee and the select board will fully understand what possible solutions there could be. So I think part of that process, if we were to skip over a true understanding of how it works here, how calls come in, how officers go out, how it gets handled, what's the next step in the process, where are those holes in the support process for our community, we need to understand all that. So I think it's essential that we include that too. So anyway, I'm very excited, and I've given up on being outside on such a beautiful day because I'm very excited about moving forward with this process. So I see that, and every time I look at your name, Malika is possibly coming up because your hand was up, and I think even Patrick Moreland is helping move us along here by doing that for me. Thank you. Can you take yourself off mute and welcome?
Thank you so much. Yeah, so I've been, as you know, part of the group that drafted some of these proposals, and also as part of the group that met with Peter last week. And I think, I'm really resonating with what a lot of you have said about like feeling positive and hopeful about this whole thing, and bringing this long and educational and grueling process to a close, but also to a starting place. Very exciting. And yeah, so grateful, Peter, for your work in helping us sort of synthesize some things and make some edits. We, from what I've heard from others who've been involved, mostly feel very, very positive about the changes and hopeful about coming to a final decision tonight. And have just a couple little things that we would like to, there's a lot, there's a number of things that changed, and most of those we're totally fine with. We're looking to compromise, but there were a couple of pieces that got dropped that we'd like to get in there. So I'll talk about those. I can talk about those all together right now or one at a time, and also just want to, but first I guess I'll just address Liz's recommendation of specifically mentioning the Brattleboro Police Department. I think that's a fine idea. That is where this started. And it is important to understand the current practices and policies of the police department. Of course, I think we're all on the same page about looking more broadly than that, as we should be. But I think it's fine to mention that specifically. I don't think that anyone has a problem with that. I also think it's a fine idea to leave that very open-ended and let the committee and the facilitator and the community at large sort of figure out what that looks like. Do you want me to just go through each of the things that we want to suggest as final edits, or do you want me to address those one at a time?
I would say go ahead.
How many?
Oh, sorry, there's 3.
Okay. Could I just ask, Malika, is this sort of a, what's the word? Compression, amalgamation? Have you collected these from others, or will there be other people wanting to make points, or?
There may be other people wanting to make points, but
Okay.
I'm sort of speaking on behalf of a number of different people who've, talked with Peter and talked since, so there probably won't be too many.
Thank you.
Or at least none that I know of, let me say that.
That's fine. Go right ahead.
Okay. All right. So, I will try to be specific as you asked. The first one is, Peter actually mentioned that we'd probably have something else about this. This is number 4 in process overview. And this is one place where there was a fairly significant like deletion of what we had and in addition. One of the pieces that was added that we're actually okay with was the line where it says, while not excluding community members who may not identify as part of any statistically marginalized population. We're happy to include that. It wasn't, I don't think, our intention to explicitly exclude those people, but more the emphasis on making sure that these people who typically are not included in these kind of processes do get included, and also because of their relevant experiences and expertise. So that we're fine with. The piece that was deleted was about these people these different groups of people who we want to prioritize including. We actually had initially in our internal drafting, said, please include all of, make sure people from these different groups have priority. But then we're sort of concerned about actually tokenization, which I think is probably a concern of you all's as well. And that's why we included that people from those groups should have experience in advocacy and activism around those issues. And that sort of is the difference between just plucking a random person with a certain identity versus bringing people who really are going to speak from the place of expertise by experience, which is, I think, is the whole point of prioritizing certain groups. So our rewrite, I'll read you the paragraph and then I'll point out the specific language that's different. Simultaneous with this RFP process, the Select Board will create a community safety review committee made up of a cross-section of Brattleboro area residents. Applications will be solicited, and in its selection the committee of committee members, the Select Board will prioritize the inclusion of people who are part of statistically marginalized communities who also have experience in advocacy and activism towards community safety. This would include Black, Indigenous, people of color, those who use drugs, psychiatrically labeled people, people with disabilities, domestic violence and sexual assault survivors, poor people, people who are experiencing or have experienced homelessness, LGBTQ plus folks, and more, while not excluding community members who do not identify with any of these groups. Participation in this committee will be compensated fairly at a rate to be determined by the Select Board. So the edits there are just that the Select Board will prioritize the inclusion of people who are part of statistically marginalized communities who also have experience in advocacy and activism towards community safety. And then the list of different groups is the same as it was. And then participation in this committee will be compensated. We just added the word fairly. I'm sure that would be what you all would want to do anyway. Joe, should I keep going with my other? That's it for that section. Should I talk about the other sections now?
Is that okay?
Do you want me to email that to someone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you could email it to Peter Elwell, perhaps I might ask him to speak to a couple of these, depending on the others.
Great. Awesome. Someone will email that to Peter right now.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll move on then. The next one.
Please, yeah.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
So the next one is in assumptions of the study, number 7, I think, or maybe it's number 6 now. But where it talks about, well, it currently reads, a forum and process to collect community members' experiences with police and other emergency responders, including mental health crisis services, anonymously without fear of retribution by police or the state. This is actually our original language, I think, but we just wanted to suggest adding a sentence that said, This would include gathering people's stories through one-on-one interviews without sharing details publicly, as removal of names in a small community does not sufficiently address anonymity. So I think, you know, it's clear that if someone's maybe submitting something anonymously with their name removed, the, you know, police officers or crisis workers or whatever involved in that instance might still know who that person is. So we just wanted to suggest that there was a way for the committee or the facilitator to gather those stories and share sort of the themes or the lessons without sharing the details, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And then the final thing is also in the section on assumptions of the study. I think what is now number 10, this is the section about conflicts of interest. We wanted to suggest that the select board consider the appropriateness of including or allowing the inclusion of police, law enforcement members on this committee. That may not be a relevant concern. It's very possible they wouldn't want to be involved in that capacity. We do think it's important that the committee have conversations with law enforcement, that absolutely those folks in that role add their experience and perspectives to the conversation. But if part of the function of this whole process is to review the police and their practices, their performance, their policies, it's important that they be informed by the police, but that police shouldn't be serving on the committee. That seems like a conflict of interest. And then also to make sure that the people who, that we want to include as many community members as possible as part of that process, that I think creating a, you know, safe enough place would be important, that they not be involved in that capacity. So we totally hear the desire for avoiding exclusion. We're on board, but I think that role might not make sense in that particular role.
Malika, can you tell me what number that is again? I just wanted to read what it says now.
Yeah, I think it's number 10 on the assumptions of the study. It currently says, any individual who is involved in the committee must be transparent about any possible conflicts of interest based on employment or other affiliations. This requirement applies equally to all applicants during the application/appointment process and to all members of the committee as the committee conducts its business. And I think our suggestion there is just to add a line about you know, being a member of law enforcement or part of the Brattleboro Police Department would be a conflict of interest that would preclude service in that capacity.
Okay, thank you. Was that your 3?
Yeah,
okay.
Those are our 3 things.
Great. Board members. Liz. Oh, might have been Ian.
Peter.
I couldn't tell.
I would really like it if Peter could weigh in on these comments, because he's had so much familiarity with it before this select board.
Sure.
You mind?
Thank you.
Sure. My overall comment on the first item and the third item would be essentially the same. But I want to acknowledge that there's a more complicated context in which the suggestion is made within paragraph 4 of process overview. So I want to come back and say a little something more about that. But I have an overarching comment that would be the same about the suggested prohibition of a police officer being appointed in paragraph 10, and then the suggested sort of reinsertion of some language, although it is different language that's proposed tonight from what was originally there in 4. And that is that, and this will not come as news to the 5 folks that I was fortunate to spend the time with last Thursday working through this and many other aspects of this really thoroughly in a way that I know was important for me, both in terms of the work on this document and more broadly, and I hope was also helpful to them. What I said then and still believe now is that the Select Board is responsible for the creation of this advisory committee. You are agreeing to a proposal that's been made to you that there ought to be a committee of people that represent a broad cross-section of the community who will do this work on behalf of the community and on behalf of the board and bring you, together with the facilitator, recommendations for how to improve community safety in Brattleboro. And in that exercise of Select Board authority, it may be because I work with you all the time on these kinds of things and all the business of the town, that I have a greater level of comfort and confidence in how that would, how you would exercise this appointment authority in the first instance. But what I have suggested to the drafters and would say about this tonight is anything that constrains who you can appoint makes it less fully the Select Board's advisory committee. And in fact, for better or for worse, it is the Select Board that, when you are ready to launch this process, will launch this process. You'll be doing it at the urging of the community. But as we've spoken about before, there are options outside of town government for community action and organizing around these kinds of issues. The work that's gone on over these last 6 to 8 weeks has been focused on creating a town government process for this as the focus of it in the community. And therefore you'll be launching it and responsible for it. And so in that context, I think that anything that constrains you in your appointment decisions is not optimum. I would say that ultimately it's at the discretion of the board in terms of the two specific things that have been suggested to you. And while I think the particular naming of excluding police officers in number 10 is especially not helpful, because my understanding from you 2 weeks ago and what I took to my work on this during the intervening time was that you wanted exclusionary language out of the document. You understood why there was some really intentional inclusionary language in it, and you wanted that left as much as possible, but you wanted exclusionary language removed. And so this would reinsert some exclusionary language, and I think for that reason it's not helpful, but it's also not improper if you decide to put it in. The other is a much more nuanced question, I think, because of the value of the expertise that is represented in the particular classification of people that is being described and urged by the drafters for you to reinsert some language speaking specifically to those who have been engaged in advocacy and activism. And again, I would just say that, while that speaks, I think to something that is more on point with the, maybe to like what Ian spoke about earlier about getting out of our comfort zone. There's a lot about this that is going to be new and different and challenging for all of us as we go forward with an effort that is, by definition, something that's not just to consider what might need to be improved and changed, but actually to undertake that consideration in a way that represents change for us. That's something, a new and different kind of process. Given that that's what this is about, and that this is specifying inclusionary language as opposed to something that adds back in exclusionary language, I feel like this is less problematic in that way of what I was describing about constraining your choices. But it still does narrow down your choices in at least the suggestion of who you will be looking for to appoint to this committee. And so I think there's just a judgment call for the board to make in your final adjustments to this before you're ready to approve it. There's not a right and wrong to this. And as I urged the community members in the conversation last Thursday, I state for the rest of the public tonight what you know very well in the conduct of your duties, which is everything you do in public. You do it in this kind of setting. In happier days, you do it sitting in a room, being on BCTV. And instead, we're sitting in our little boxes on Zoom, being on BCTV. But there's no place to hide for you. So you will be accountable for the appointments you make to the committee, and you'll be accountable for the decisions you make in January and beyond. And so I don't think these changes are necessary in order to achieve even the purposes that have been brought forward by the collaborative community group. But having said all of that, if you decided to put that language in to your document before launching it out into the world, there's nothing to stop you from it. It's not illegal or improper. The third one I need to go back to. Here, I have an especially strong personal concern about it. So I'll just say it. It's, I understand the need, and frankly, at the very beginning of this 2 months ago, I didn't understand as well the need for there to be some part of this process that allows anonymous testimony. But in the fullness of everything we've heard and everything that the community has brought forward and everything that you've engaged around in these recent weeks, as well as communication with people outside of these meetings, it's clear to me that there are people in our community who have important information to share, who won't feel safe or able to share that if they have to identify themselves in a public meeting. So that's one of those things that will need to be different. And you've already indicated your willingness to have that. There'll be a component of this process that will be extremely different from our normal public processes. There's a reason to protect the interests of everyone involved, usually protecting less powerful people from more powerful and more influential people from cooking up stuff in private and then sort of smoothing it over in public and making it seem like public policy. There's reasons why this stuff doesn't get done in private. There's reasons why public decisions by governing bodies get made based on the evidence that's brought forward to you in public in these meetings. And we're bumping up in that against the reality that our processes aren't, they don't explicitly exclude folks, but they aren't as inclusive or inviting or feeling as safe as they could be. And you know, that'll be something that we're all working on, not just in community safety, but in town governance. So recognizing all of that, I feel as though the document as it stands, as it was brought to you this evening before this additional recommended change, already acknowledges that shortcoming of our public processes and that need for this particular effort to extend beyond our normal boundaries and allow anonymous experience, allow the anonymous sharing of experience that might be especially important to our learning process and then the recommendations that come out of the process. I'd have to hear the language again to react specifically to the words that were chosen. I'm not sure that that the words themselves are problematic. I am concerned about anything that further buttresses the anonymity. Understanding that we are a small town and understanding the concern that the intent of this paragraph could be thwarted if that anonymity is not buttressed. A further buttressing of it just extends us further outside of the public's business being done in the public. And so I'm concerned about that. I think you need to weigh that one especially carefully. We already have identified that there will be a component of this that will allow anonymous testimony to be given. If you also decide in your collective judgment that this buttressing is important because we are a small community, and so you want to be especially careful to make sure that people really are fully anonymous. Once again, you know, this isn't something that there's a barrier that says you can't do that. We have to say, gee, we're sorry, but we can't make that change. You could make that change if you want to. I'd urge you to be especially cautious about that one, because the end result that I see that comes from that is having to entrust that what gets brought forward, filtered through others, is as valid for your consideration and how that translates into the recommendations for action as the things that you've been able to hear people be individually accountable for in the process. And so again, it's a very complicated situation in this particular question and in this particular process. But we should always be extremely careful about doing the public's business in a private, shielded setting, where some of the facts are going to be known from the public record and some of the facts are going to be brought forward as relayed secondhand by the facilitator or others.
Thank you, Peter. I just saw Elizabeth sign my, so I have a little note to myself to stop saying, so that was a lot. Do other board members want to chime in on those three requested? Daniel.
Sure, thanks. I think that, so let me speak to them one by one. So the first one was about who we really want to make sure gets included in the committee. And there was something there that Malika was speaking to that was about the difference between kind of like an identity versus like people with experience. And I've had experience with a group that for a time was known as the lived experience core experts. And those are people mostly who'd experienced or were currently experiencing homelessness. And it was a committee like no other, and in some ways is sort of a good model for what we might end up with here. And I hope that in our process to get applicants for this committee, that we will be looking for people who are the lived experience core experts. And I think that Malika's point about wanting to avoid tokenization is really important. We don't want just like, you know, we've got this one, right? And we need another one of these ones, you know, that's no good. So I support that. And then to go to point number 3, because it's sort of about who can be on the committee, the question of whether the police could or couldn't be on it, I'm kind of agnostic about it. I trust that when we weigh who should be on the committee, we'll weigh each of those appointments seriously, and we'll really kind of be trying to create a committee that we think is going to be most effective. So I could be swayed either way, but it's not something I'm going to fight to the death about tonight. And then I think that it is important that we make sure that people are able, you know, I don't want the entire kind of testimony that comes out of this committee to be anonymous, but there should be some opportunity for, if it needs to be, you know, that it can be anonymous, and that, and in kind of speaking to what Malika was saying about this being a very small place, you know, even just removing the name doesn't always guarantee anonymity. So I have to deal with personally identifiable information, and that is like, you know, obvious stuff. And also like, you have to just get rid of as much of that as possible and keep that safe. So I think, yeah, making sure that people can speak anonymously when they need to, you know, if it's really required. So I'm mostly pretty positive about these, and as I say, fairly agnostic about the police representation on the committee.
Thanks, Daniel. Anyone else? Or I will, okay, Brandy?
I just was going to say that I agreed with Daniel.
You're very low. Just wiggle your,
It's good. It's like the little man in the box.
it's like an AM radio. Oh, I hear something
Can you
going
hear me
on.
now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I had taken my earbuds out so I could interact with my children. And I guess I can't live without the earbuds for speaking. So I agree with Daniel about the importance of non-tokenism. And I'm also familiar with the group that centered people with life experiences. And it was incredible to be not one of those people and also to watch how those people reacted to being the center and being empowered in that way. It was a really wonderful experience. That group was great. I do think it's important that police not be on the committee. I also don't know that they would want to be on the committee, but I think if we're sitting here saying some things might need to be anonymous and there are people who might not be able to speak, but it's okay if the people they're afraid to speak in front of are on the committee, that's weird. There's some cognitive dissonance there for me, but, and that's nothing against our police department. That's just kind of a weird thing for me to put scared people in front of the people they're scared of and say, all right, we're on a committee together, let's do this thing. People might not be ready for that yet. Not quite yet. Maybe there's a point, and the anonymity to me is a no-brainer. I would just put out there as a person who has spoken really publicly, if you do choose to speak in this committee and you have any ounce of feeling like you have some privilege and a little bit of resiliency and you can share your story, please do, because that will be so important, not only to those who are a little afraid to speak up, but to everybody. So, but definitely some anonymity will be important because there are some people that just don't have that, they don't have that shield. And we might have to provide that for them. And those are my feelings.
Okay. Thanks, Brandy. Ian?
Yeah, so I'll address, I guess I want to take 3 first, which is the police. I want to apply Daniel's logic to 1, which is basically, he said, and Daniel, I won't misquote you, I'll just sort of paraphrase. My understanding was you said, basically, you sort of have faith in the way that we're going to do the process and who we select, that it's going to be a committee that's going to be good. And I don't really understand why that would not just exactly apply to 1, right? So we don't want to tokenize people. No, of course not. I mean, that would be entirely contrary to the entire soul of this document. And so I'm just a little confused, and I would love to hear you respond. Why that same logic wouldn't apply to the people who we are, identifying who we want to focus on being on this committee, why that same logic wouldn't apply there. And then before Daniel responds to that, I'll speak to 2, which is, and I feel bad for the people who have spoken to me about this from the community group because they've heard me say it like 3 or 4 times. I really believe that this particular piece of work product is one of the most important things that is going to come out of this committee, which is the testimony of community members who have had interactions with Brattleboro Police and also with community safety. I really think that there are voices out there that are not being heard currently that need to be heard. And so what I'm wondering is, we've kind of had this back and forth about how much the facilitator is going to sort of define these different processes in the way the committee moves, right? And it sounds kind of like we're moving back the other direction and saying, well, now we kind of want to like really define this because we want to make sure it's safe. And I'm wondering, is that taking a step in the opposite direction to what we've been trying to do, which is keep this pretty open so that facilitators who provide us with proposals can really give us things that they really believe are going to be ways that they can, for example, take testimony that's anonymous in a way that we can use that data and use those testimonials to enact change. So I guess my answers are, I think I'm probably at the moment against 3. I need an answer on 1 from Daniel, and 2, I would need to hear the language again.
Daniel, would you want to respond? Should you?
Should I choose to be?
Should you choose to be? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think what I really wanted to say in that one was I want this committee to be made up of lived experience core experts. I want us to make sure that in our process of appointing people to this committee, that's the standard that we're holding to. I can't force any of you all to do that. You'll vote for whoever you want to do. But I think, if we're going to do this well, the committee should be a committee with lived experience, so I guess I'm not really sure what it is that you want from me. I feel like maybe I just talk too much. That's what I want. However we get that is fine.
And so your feeling is we should sort of restrict the select board now instead of.
I know that not everyone in the world trusts us to do exactly what they would like to see us do, but I do trust the professionalism of the 4 of you and the way that you go about your work. So I trust that given a really brilliant slate of folks to appoint to this committee, we also haven't discussed how many people will be on it or whatever, but that's another day. That we will make choices that create the best committee that we can. And, I'm thinking about a recent CPCC interview process. There were some good candidates. We chose a really great candidate. And yeah, I trust us. Peter. Sorry, Tim.
Peter, go right ahead.
Yeah, Liz, I know you've got something to say. If it's okay, I'd like to just interject because we might need Malika to come back on and clarify something. I'm hearing a disconnect, I think, and I just want to make sure we're all talking about the same thing. The language that centers the voices of people with lived experience is intact. There was additional language that went beyond that to describe more fully sort of a subset of such people, is the way I understood it. Okay, that language I removed. What's being proposed by the group now, the drafters, is to put in not to restore the original language, but to put a piece of that back in that speaks explicitly to those who have experience, not just with lived experience of these various types that are still described in the document, but also with advocacy and activism around these issues, those issues and community safety. And as I described before, I'm not suggesting there's a right or a wrong there. What I am suggesting is that narrows the field. And so in the discussion you've been having, it's been sounding to me like the question is, name that lived experience or don't. And I just wanted to make clear that the question before you isn't that. The named lived experience is in the document that I've proposed to you. And the question is whether to add to that, restore to that some language around advocacy and activism. And what I've just done is speak to the proposal that's been made by others. So I just want to acknowledge that I see Fisher's hand is up, and there may be others that can help clarify that so that the board will be able to define and then make your decision.
Thank you. I'd like to go to Liz and then make a quick comment myself.
Thank you. So what we've been through, and everybody thanked Peter for all his work this week in bringing this forward. But the answers that he just gave were so on point because they reflect the process that he made in, it's easy to say, well, everybody's not going to be happy with this, but he carefully weighed what the select board responsibility was, what the drafters intended. And, he threaded that needle and really did a great job. And I think the part that I'd like to emphasize now was that we had to have, trust that he would do this good job, and he did. And we all have to have trust in each other that the select board will do its job, that the committee will be properly founded, that the facilitator will do a good job, and this is all going to result in the work that we want done for the community. And I think if we're if we pick up that language too much now and start to front load who's on the committee, I think we need to stop. I think we need to say what Daniel said before. You got to trust the select board to make these decisions. The anonymity is already there. People want to flesh that out more. The making sure that marginalized people are heard or are on the committee is already there. And I forget the third one, but they've been addressed. And I don't think that they need to be tinkered with anymore.
Thanks, Liz. I will just say that I think this all literally comes down to who we pick for this committee. That's really what this is all about. And I think it's better to go with the existing slightly modified document. We should vote on this document. If it fails, then we have more work to do, evidently. So I feel like that's what should happen here. We should just fall back on what we know we have support for, and people are just going to have to trust that we're not going to be seeking people. We're going to have tokenism in mind when we seek people for this board. We're going to be seeking people with lived experience. We're going to be very, careful to appoint anybody who has very close ties to police or very hard, fast feelings on either side, I think. So I think we're gonna appoint a balanced committee. That's what it comes down to for me. Board, would you like to hear from some public and then vote, or what's your preference? We are getting close to our break time.
I'd like to hear from people.
Okay. Folks, if you could jump on George is first, and please, I beg of you to stay to the document itself and what you've heard us talking about just in the last hour. Thank you. Hi, George.
Hi. Been out of town, getting back, and maybe I'm a little bit behind the 8 ball here. I read the original proposal. I heard that Peter's done what I'm sure is a really good job of working on it. Any place I can see the results of his work?
Sure. It's on the town's website, where the backup for the select board meeting is always posted there the Friday before the meeting. So you go to select board on the homepage, and then to draft minutes and backup materials, I believe it's called.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, George. Ricky, are you able to connect?
Can you hear me?
No.
I can call in then.
Good enough.
Okay. Ricky might try to call in. Alex is next in our queue. Hi, Alex.
Hi. Thanks, everyone, for being here. And thanks for this hopeful last push. Team cheering it on. I got a little frazzled on what to say and how to keep it short because I have pasta on the stove. But I think really what I want to speak to is the process point number 4 / edit number 1, however we want to describe it, around the makeup of the committee. And I want to name that recently I was in an amazing training with the folks at the Management Center. If you don't know their work, they are incredible, and they're doing full online trainings around basic management and specifically for diversity and inclusion. And they talk about when you're setting goals to be very clear on the specifics of the goal, right? Like SMART goals, SMARTY goals, however you want to name it. And part of that is when you name a specific for your goal, the entire process to get there is going to be clear. And so what I'm thinking about and how that applies here is when we talk about who we want to see represented in the committee, it also speaks to the work of the outreach for who's going to apply. And to me, that has already been a conversation that we've all agreed upon, that the makeup of this committee needs to have the extra effort and the extra push to have a larger cross-section than the majority of our town committees, than the majority of our town government, be it elected or town employees, that we're really looking to get a different result in this committee makeup. And I think we all agree on that. That is something that has not been contested in the fact that it needs to be different than how it's been. And so one of the pieces for me is that how do we get there and how do we ensure we're going to get there is to make sure that we have the right people apply, that we make sure folks know that that they can apply and to support them in the process, which is a conversation we have with Peter on Thursday. And so including language in this piece around making sure that folks specifically with a certain experience that I sort of, I guess, assumed we were on the same page about, and it's fine that we're not, is important in that. And with that, I think just there's an element, for me, there's like a heart moment here that so much work has gone in from the select board to all these meetings, right? 5-hour meetings, so many times, extra meetings. You know, I only know of the one-on-one meetings that have happened with our group in each select board meeting, and thank you for that. There's all the town staff that has to be here for all of these meetings. And there are for every 5-hour meeting that there is here in public, there is at least 1, if not 2, 3 to 4 hour meetings that the collaborative group is having to prepare for this. So there is so much time and effort coming in. And this is the moment where we are handing full power over. And that's hard because, right, this is something we put our heart and souls into and that we've had to work to get to this place. And I hear a lot around trust, that we need to just simply trust you. And I think there is an element of also asking for y'all to trust us as you can continue to trust us as you have been, to say that we're not at this point in the final hour asking for edits because we want to keep having long meetings. We're asking for them because they're really important to the work that we've all been doing for decades and for the experience that we're bringing here. And we're asking for the trust from you for the experience that we're bringing, the same way that we're accepting and trusting you for when this gets decided moving forward. Y'all are going to be the ones making these decisions, and we're entrusting that to you. So this is our last moment to put in our voice. And so for the edits that we're suggesting, they're not small to us. And they are, in fact, like our last moment to have our voice in there. And we hope you take them seriously. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Shay. Hi, Shay. Oop, you were there in a moment, and then you disappeared. Are you still with us? Hi, we can hear you.
Did you want me to stay on? Oh, great.
I was in a unmute battle with the administrator, sorry. I'm so grateful, you all. I echo all of the thanks and all of the appreciations and the hopes, and I'm really grateful. as a content warning, I won't be getting specific. I'm just going to name this as like a lived experience and identity. That one of the things that I bring to this process and all of my work is that I'm a survivor of intimate partner violence and sexual violence. And I also do advocacy work and support work in that arena. That's like a group of people that I have been supporting for a long time. I do a lot of education work around that issue. And I know for myself, as well as so many members of that community, that this piece about anonymity, about carrying forward the lessons or the themes and leaving some of the specifics of stories out, and also about the makeup of the committee, potentially including police officers or not, is an absolute make it or break it issue for that community of people. There are I don't know if you all know anything about the statistics of how much of that kind of violence goes unreported, but it is a vast, vast majority. And the reason is that people do not trust that those experiences are going to be safely held, and that there's going to be safety within those processes, like legally with police and government. So I think that ties all this together. I'm going to stay specific, but I just want to say there's a thread there with all these pieces: trust, anonymity, and the makeup of the committee, which is that the community of people that I come from and the experiences that I've had make it so that you will have very different outcomes in the process if you are not very clear from the jump in language about the protection that you're offering people. And if you don't, and if you want the voices of people who have experienced harm and violence in our community who haven't been able to access support through the police or our safety systems, if you want those voices to be in this process, you need to be clear on paper. We cannot ask those people to trust you. They don't know you all. Those are very, very intense experiences, right? So I trust because I've been in some meetings with you, and I see your heart and your effort and your drive over this course of time. But I think that's the piece of like getting that language in there that feels really important and non-negotiable for me as one member of this large group, that intention has to be crystal clear if you're going to include the experiences that we're talking about here. And those experiences are generally very private and very vulnerable experiences. So I know for myself, if there was a police officer on the committee that I was anonymously reporting my story to, I would not be reporting my story of how they handled that incident to that committee. You know what I mean? So I just want to add that voice in there and really like personalize why these things are so important and why we're driving. It would be so much nicer to just get this done and vote immediately. I would love that so much. But why we're driving for this language to be included is because we actually know some really intense realities about what our experiences have been with policing and with government in addressing those kind of harms. And I want the voices of these people that I know in our community who have not been adequately enough supported to be included in this process, not necessarily all as committee members, but in these forums to collect people's information. So I don't think we need to have like the committee's process needs to be deeply anonymous, but can there be any language about, taking the lessons and leaving the details in any forum of data collection? I don't think that that's going to make this whole process happen in the dark. I think it's going to radically expand the amount of stories and people that you are going to be able to hear from, and that's going to deepen your wisdom and give you insights that you would have never gotten otherwise into the way that this stuff actually happens in the community. So I'm so grateful for the work, and I really hope that you can that trust can be reciprocal, like Alex said, that's coming from a very deeply real place, that ask. And how you choose to exclude or include in the language is up to you, but in not adding this exclusionary sort of language, you actually are going to exclude the voices of lots and lots of people who really need to be included. The whole goal of this whole proposal is deep inclusion in a way that it doesn't happen very often in governance. So I'm so grateful for the work, and I just hope that you can hear that little angle that we really want to hand this over and trust that, but that trust it's not reasonable to ask everyone in our community who's been harmed to trust us, any of us, supporters or governance or anyone. And so we have to be clear and show people why they can trust us. And I think that you're doing that. You're going to get there, and we're doing it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Shay. So we're getting close to our time. Can I go back to something, Ian? You said for your number 2, which I believe contained the one-on-one statement, you had to hear the language. Did we ever hear the language?
Not again. It's my fault. I was trying to write as fast as I could.
As Shay was talking, I did, I read the language that's already in there, and I think the argument's being made that it's not enough. I don't know. Can I just read that? Number 6, assumptions of study. A forum and process to collect community members' experiences with police and other emergency responders, including mental health crisis services, anonymously, without fear of retribution by police or the state. I believe the one-on-one was in addition to that point, or do I have that wrong? See, I mean, I'm just wondering if we're all clear that that is already built in. We just don't specify the process.
Did they send the edits to you, Peter, so that you can clarify that?
You're very, I can sort of hear you, Brandy, but I think Brandy's asking Peter to clarify something.
Need your earbuds.
I can't believe you could sort of hear me. That's interesting.
I could.
Yeah. That's weird. Whatever, that's techie. I'll figure that out later. But Peter, what I was asking is, did they ever send over the notes so that you can clarify that language?
I got the language for,
awesome.
For paragraph 4, I got the explicit language. I didn't get it for the other 2 proposed changes. So we'll need for Malika or someone else to come back on and make that clear, or email it to me. Either way is fine.
Thank you so much.
So I guess my question maybe to Peter would be, could the proposed one-on-one language that was brought forth, could that not be a proposal brought in the answer to an RFP by one of the people? Like, they read that says people are going to be able to give their anonymous testimony without fear of retribution by police or the state. They read that and they say, well, the way to do that is by doing one-on-ones and making sure we take out some of the details of the story, so that in a small community, am I understanding that correctly? Like that would be an okay thing to do if that's what the facilitator decides. And so we're kind of like preempting the facilitator and doing it ahead of time. Or Peter, do you feel like that particular language, even if it was to be proposed by a facilitator, would be a no-go?
No, not at all. I'm sorry if I left you with that impression.
No, I'm totally trying to clarify for myself.
I'm not suggesting it's a no-go tonight, or if it comes in from a facilitator. What I was suggesting is my own personal and professional discomfort with going deeper and more explicitly into the anonymity piece in the town's document. You've heard description of why that's important to the drafters, and I just think there's something there you need to weigh. The thing that I also tried to acknowledge in the first instance is we're already into a realm that is really unusual for us in doing the public's business. We've already said there will be an opportunity for people to give anonymous sharing of experiences. And it's just a question. You've heard Shay speak to why it's important. You've heard others speak to explicitly what's being asked. And there isn't a right or wrong answer to the inclusion of that language. It is going to be an important part of the process. You could decide to wait and see how the facilitators propose to handle that, or you could incorporate the language that you've been asked to incorporate tonight.
Thanks, Peter. Apologies to other people waiting, but I'd like to vault Malika up to the top here to answer a question that I think might be here to answer.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I just sent the language for that number 6 about the anonymity to Peter. So hopefully, Peter, you can pass that along to folks, but I can also just read it really quick. It's the addition of a sentence that said, this, meaning the option to, include things anonymously, would include gathering people's stories through one-on-one interviews without sharing details publicly, as removal of names in a small community does not sufficiently address anonymity. If there's something you all want to change about the wording of that, that's fine, but I think that's the concept, and Peter has that, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Malika.
I mean, for me, changing a word, making it such as, like suggesting an example such as, that still gives enough power to the committee and the facilitator to hash that out without making it a demand from the select board for the committee. But because the language is in there, as I said, but as in deference to that desire to underline that, especially the end of the sentence, you could say such as. Ian?
Yeah, so it's kind of like this is offering a possible way that they could achieve the sentence prior. Yeah, I'd be really curious to hear what the community response to that would be, because I kind of feel like we've really given a lot to the facilitator to decide on this, and I don't really see why we should restrict them now.
Yeah.
But providing an option, or providing an example that the community really believes would be a good one, that seems to be a pretty good, fair compromise.
And I might just caution you to say facilitator is deciding, and the facilitator really should be playing the role of facilitating. It's really the committee that will be deciding.
True, fair. Thank you.
Okay. So rather than get into a back and forth, I think maybe, unless somebody has a strenuous objection on the board, we should sort of take that as a friendly amendment idea. Maybe Peter had his finger.
Yeah, I think we're really close to actually being done with that particular one. I want to make sure that I understand Malika's hand signal. So
yeah, it looked like it was
while Ian was speaking, Malika's camera came on and we got a thumbs up. And I just want to make sure, Malika, that your intent there was accepting the such as at the beginning of that and then using the rest of the proposed language. And if that's true, it sounds to me like the board can be done with that item.
Yes, I think that's fine. I think that's a helpful, small edit.
Oh,
great.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, we have to take a break. That's just the hard truth of this. And I'm tempted to go through everybody, but it could take a while. We have 4 people who want to speak, and I'm trusting that they want to speak to the document themselves and what we're currently talking about, because we don't want to get too sidetracked. What do you think, board? Should we take a break now and come back, take a couple comments, and then have a vote because we have other business to attend to? I got a couple thumbs up. Elizabeth's looking very dramatic and dark right now, so look like a film noir movie. How about 8:20? That's a crisp 10 minutes, if not 9 minutes. Is that, should I go a little longer?
No, 10 minutes is fine.
Okay. 8:20, we'll see you back. Thanks, everybody. Hold on line there, everyone, if you'd like to say something. Thanks, everybody, for the break. We are going to take quick comments from 3 community members. Oh, wait. Could be 4 community members. Very quick comments from 4 community members right away, I think, if that's okay with the board. Lana is first. Hey.
Hi. Nice to see everyone. Thank you all for all the work that you're doing. I really appreciate it. So I want to start out by echoing what Shay and Alex have already said so eloquently. I stand by what they say, and as a member of this community and as someone who has been directly affected by police violence my entire life, I agree with all of the points that they made, and I hope that you took those into consideration. And I wanted to speak on the question of including police on the committee. And while I agree that at present, it's highly unlikely that any police would really be wanting to join a committee, it's really important to be intentional in the very beginning about what this committee is. We're here today because recent events have exposed a chasm in our society. While this chasm may be new to some of the members of our community, it is not new to the people who are affected by police violence. The people whose demonstrations and voices have brought us this issue to the main stage, and for them, that trust that you are building is something that it is incumbent upon you to build. It is not something that you are just given. It is not something that you even deserve. It is something that you have to show the members of the community that you stand by them and that you're doing these things, and that this isn't lip service, right? This is something that you believe in and that you see a need for. So trust, intention, and understanding that it's not a given. Even the possibility of police members on the committee at any point in its tenure, you are simply recreating systems of oppression. You are whitewashing and you are paying lip service to what people are trying to accomplish. And I really hope that you take that into account. And I think, Peter, when you said earlier that some of these things that had been brought up recently were news to you, some things that you hadn't thought of, right? And I think that's great that you said that. And that's a really important thing to remind you of. It's not news to me. I don't need to be reminded. I don't need to be told. And neither do any of the people that we're talking about. So we really need to be listening to those voices and what they want. And starting this with those intentions and with that voice being at the foreground. So that's all. Thank you so much. I appreciate, and Elizabeth, it's so great to see you.
Thank you. Ricky, I hope your connection is a little more solid this time. Do you want to give it a shot?
I called. Can you talk to me on the phone instead? Because my computer audio apparently isn't working well.
Mute.
We can actually hear you if you just, I think the problem at the moment is you might have to turn down your, however you're listening to us as you speak. So do you want to give it a try? Because having you leave and call might be a little bit too much. Unless you're unless you're dialed in now. Is that? If you're dialed in now, you can be invited to unmute, and that's *6, I think, is how you do it on your end. If you're the one number I see, I don't know if Patrick can help. Still not hearing anything, Ricky. We might move to the next person in line and try to catch you at the end. Okay. Patrick, if you can help, looks like Tom Grasso maybe next in line. Tom, are you there?
Hello?
Hello.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Hi.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, I'll be very brief. Thanks so much to everyone for all the great work that they've put into this, and particularly Peter Elwell, who's really, I think, gotten to a point where the document, I think, is the best it's going to be at this point. I have a lot of issues with it, but I think at this point in time, we should move forward with the proposal as it is, including, in particular, the amendment that Liz offered. If we think about this in the context of the systemic racism that's existed in our country since before its start, and we're now 10 years after Michelle Alexander wrote her book, The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness, I think we have to recognize that the police and our criminal justice system is at the center of systemic racism in this country. And if we don't focus on that, we will be missing something very important in solving this problem in the town of Brattleboro. So the only other comment I'll make is, I think if you're going to hire a facilitator, it needs to be somebody who's not currently involved in the town. I don't know how you can be an unbiased facilitator if you're actively involved in doing work in the town already. I think it's important as a facilitator to be an independent, unbiased view of the work and to be able to facilitate the discussion. We all bring implicit bias to the work we do. And I think it's important that we find someone who, beyond being an anti-racist, has that unbiased engagement in the town. Lastly, I'd just say, I think that we need more specific recommendations for what the select board and our town representatives, as well as our state representatives and our state government, are going to do about this problem. It's the mass incarceration and systemic racism is not something that the town of Brattleboro and the people of Brattleboro are going to solve on their own. So there should be recommendations related to state and federal laws that the town people would like to seek changes in, so that we have a comprehensive response to this problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. I'm going to go ahead and let Ricky have the last word if they are able, and let's go to Dell. Probably the name of a computer. It's not your fault. You can't rename yourself. Oh, wait a minute. Ricky is talking, maybe. Ricky, are you on?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. So I have at least 4 questions. Has there been any strategizing to motion the municipality accept online petitions in general, and specifically for establishing this publicly elected committee so as to not have to continue negotiating with the select board, but to just have the public vote on this committee instead? That's my first question.
So no, we're the Brattleboro Select Board. We're forming this committee, and that's how it's happening. Do you have your next question?
The second question is that would all involved include the Indigenous municipal name in this document and future municipal documents?
So I think the question, just for our interpreters, has to do with including Indigenous names. I think when the question got rehashed, what was relied upon was some Indigenous language from our town charter. Is that correct, Peter?
It's from the town plan.
The town plan, sorry.
Yeah, and it does reference that the immediate Brattleboro area is known to the Abenaki as one Tastagak.
And we did simplify some other stuff just to try to keep it to the subject matter at hand, I think. But there was some definite thought process in including that language. What's your next question, Ricky?
Is anti-public anonymity why the public chat box participation is still voided? When will the public chat participation be enabled?
That's not a subject for us right now. We have taken a vote on the public chat box, and right now I can't allow a conversation about the way we hold a meeting. Sorry. Last question?
That's all.
Thank you. Dell will have the last public comment. And please let us know your name and where you're from. If you can hear me, go right ahead. Okay, maybe you're stepped away from the computer. I'd like to move forward. Board, what do you think?
I'd like to get back on video.
Oh,
Please.
I knew we were missing
I was just
somebody.
waiting. You
We're
know.
missing the cardinal. Please, Patrick. I think we've lost our Daniel.
Thanks. I don't know what happened there, but here I am.
Last call for Dell if they're able to join, but maybe it's currently an unattended Dell computer. Who knows? Board. I kind of have a feeling we have a positive vote to take here. That's just my own. Daniel?
Sorry. So we took care of Malika's question around how an anonymous comment would be taken. I just, I think what Lana said around whether our police force could potentially be on this committee, like, I agree it's unlikely that they will be, but I think that I would like to name that members of our police force will not be invited to take part in this committee. And that is where I stand.
Same.
Ian.
I want to kick it around a little. I know you want to move on, Tim, but I want to talk about it. I just need to talk about it. I don't understand how we're allowed to do that. So I guess that's step one. So Peter, if you can, or pull Bob on and explain to me how we're allowed to exclude anybody from a committee. And so that would be step one. And then two, I want to get a very specific answer from Brandy and Daniel, who seem to be on board with this. Who exactly you're talking about? Because are we talking about the whole police department? Are we talking about just police officers? Because there's also dispatch. There are a lot of people who are part of the entire apparatus of the police force. And if you want to start excluding people here, you got to be specific. And I am very hesitant to walk down this road at all, but I'm willing to take a little bit of a walk here because I think it's a really very reasonable point to say, hey, we've got people who want to speak on this committee and they're afraid of the police, and there's a potential that those people might be on the same committee as police officers. And even though, Peter, I really understand the way the timing is going to happen with this, they're essentially going to have to all sort of apply at the same time without an actual proposal. So they're going to have no clue. And that might silence people, and like the whole point of this is that we don't want to silence people. So I want to take the walk. I want to take the walk a little and see, and I want to hear if that's okay with everybody. And I know we want to move on, but that's where I'm at.
Let's take a short walk. Liz has her hand up first, but I know Brandy and Daniel are being queried, so let's just go ahead.
Well, yes, but Ian also wanted to hear from Peter, and so would I, because I think we've already clarified that there would be safe space and anonymity for meetings without the police. I think that was clearly in the RFP, or I knew it wasn't one time.
That got taken
So, Peter, can you speak to this controversy?
Well, yes and no. So the part that it remains, and in fact has been strengthened this evening, is the opportunity for folks to provide information to the committee in a manner that is anonymous, that protects their identity. They are fearful of the potential implications of being identified with the story that they need to tell. There was separately a part that said that police officers couldn't attend the meetings, or that there would at least be some of the meetings where police officers were told not to attend. And that part has been removed from the document. But the question now before you is whether there should be explicit exclusion of police officers from sitting as members of the committee. On that, I have one thing to offer related to Ian's question, and then I think we do need to hear from Bob Fisher, because frankly, you're really looking, Ian, I think, for the question of can the board make this decision? Can the board grant what has been asked of you?
Yeah, can I just say,
I think you need to hear from Bob about that as a matter of law. what I would say about the simultaneous piece is that is an effort to keep the process moving forward expeditiously, because now that we seem to be on the verge of being able to move forward, time is of the essence. This committee on the schedule that's before you tonight, proposed to you tonight, the committee's only going to have about 3 months to do a very substantial piece of work, at least for this initial lift and the initial recommendations that'll come out of this work. And so I think any delay in that really potentially threatens the value, reduces the value of the effort, at least during this first cycle, and the impact it might have for the decisions to be made in January and in March of 2021. So for that reason, I'm proposing that you go simultaneously. If there was enough concern among the board members that you want to hire a facilitator and have a better defined process before you invite people from the community to apply to be on the committee, then you could take these sequentially instead of simultaneously, but there would be a delay in getting the work started. And I personally think that people who want to be engaged in this probably don't need to know exactly all the details of how it's going to move forward, because what's going to happen actually is there's going to be a facilitator who's going to play a role in helping the committee move it forward, but the committee itself is going to make those decisions. The committee itself is going to decide the process ultimately and the recommendations. And so I think they can be done simultaneously, and I think they ought to be.
Cool.
Bob, do you want to jump in for Ian has a query?
Sure. With regard to, I think Peter's correct. With regard, we have two issues here with regard to what you can and can't do. If the question is, can you explicitly make appointments to this committee that exclude police officers, I think the answer is legally yes. You can appoint to this committee whoever you want to appoint. But remember that the strength of the advice that you're going to get back from this committee to the board, which is ultimately going to be making the decisions with regard to the policies set, or at least giving the policy to the town manager and down the governmental flow chart that Peter had presented at the last meeting, is going to be somewhat compromised without all of the stakeholders participating. So I think you can exclude police officers from being named as committee members. You cannot exclude police officers from coming to these committee meetings. All meetings, this is one of the things that Peter and I went over in reviewing the request for proposal, is all the meetings need to be pursuant to the open meeting law. And if police officers want to come to that, then they can come to that. I hope that answered your question, Ian.
It does, but I want one little bit of clarification. So it sounds to me like that is something that would happen in the process of picking committee members. Can we explicitly at the outset exclude anyone? That's like, you know, it sounds like to me you're saying, well, because we're picking people, we can pick whoever we want, so we could exclude whoever. But can we say, you know, police officers need not apply because we're not going to pick you? That like front language is what I'm interested about.
I think if as a board, you're going to decide that you're not wanting police officers on that committee, I think you can say that up front. I think that's a policy decision more than a legal decision. You know, it gets back to what this is going to be a select board town committee that is giving advice to the select board. Ultimately, it's the select board that will be taking action with the advice of this committee.
And if a police officer were to come to a committee meeting, so they're not on the committee, but they have the right to come to a committee meeting, they could participate in, you know, the way that the rules of open meeting law and, you know, Robert's rules or whatever it's following, they could participate.
Absolutely. That's no different in my view than when you're creating a committee, you try to look at who the stakeholders are, and you may want to appoint members from each stakeholder group to the committee so that you have a very broad dynamic in your committee. At some point, the select board or whoever is appointing these committees is going to need to limit who the stakeholders are. And it may be you try, because you can't solve all the world's problems in one committee. So the stakeholders may need to be limited in some respect. And that's going to be your decision, but that doesn't prevent any of those stakeholders as members of the public from coming to a meeting.
Thank you so much, Bob. That's really helpful.
Liz?
About that point, I mean, there's going to be committee meetings where people are giving lived experience testimony. And there's going to be committee meetings where they're going to inquire about the police. And there's going to be committee meetings where they're going to have a dialogue with social service agencies and so forth. So there's a role, Bob used the term stakeholder, it's great, but there's a role for the police here. And, you know, you could say no town employees, but they can watch it on TV. So that's where the anonymous, I mean, we can choose not to put policemen on the committee, but they're going to, you know, they want to watch the meetings on BCTV or however their whatever the minutes of the meeting are, you know, that's public. That's the public meeting. And that's the trade-off for having a public meeting versus a, you know, a private nonprofit enterprise. And so this is what the community wants. They want a public process, and that's it. And we've already discussed, you know, the ways that it can be anonymous. So I think we're good.
Yeah, for me, this comes back to still in my effort as chair to move things forward. I don't think there are 3 votes for excluding in the RFP, excluding specific people from the committee.
Just want to check on that. There's
Are you
definitely
sure?
2, and then there was one that wanted to walk down the road. So how, you know,
well, why doesn't somebody make a motion on the original, on the RFP with Liz's changes? Or no, you want to actually settle that question?
I think I want to. I think it's a really important question, and I'm kind of curious. I'm kind of curious if the community members understand that no matter who we put on the committee, anybody can come to the committee meetings.
Mm-hmm.
I think I understand that.
Okay,
Yeah,
if they do
they
understand that, and they're still asking for police officers not to be part of the committee because they think that by police officers being on the committee itself, that could silence people who are trying to give their voice to this process. I guess, like, I'm just kind of confused why we're, I'm still thinking about it, Tim. That's the issue. I'm sorry.
So,
Yes, you're allowed to do that.
Can we think back to Julie Cunningham's testimony from a few meetings back where she described a pretty awful situation?
Mm-hmm.
Julie, you know, Julie is a person that is very much capable of coming to a public meeting like this and laying that stuff out there. But like, do we really want to kind of like make that the situation that people will have to walk into, you know, or do we want to say, this is as safe a space as we can make it? Malika said it. She didn't say safe space. She said safer, safe enough. You know, it's not going to be this, you know, perfect container for everybody, but we need to make it as, you know, as safe enough as we can. And I think that the police, Bob sort of seemed to think that maybe this was about not even, you know, involving the police. Like, the police will absolutely be involved in this process. They will be looked into, they will be talked to, they will be interrogated, you know. But should they be sitting on the committee as a member of the committee? when we know that there are going to be some people in this committee that want to speak to things where harm has been caused by somebody, wearing a uniform similar to what the person in the committee is wearing. That doesn't seem right to me.
I absolutely hear that, but the distinction we're making here is actually saying up front that we are not going to allow certain community members on this committee.
I think, but Ian interrogated both of us.
Let me just finish. The rubber hits the road when we actually, well, I was speaking.
I know, but I thought I was interrogated. My apologies.
I'll come right back to you. The rubber hits the road when we actually appoint this committee. But I want this committee to be successful, and I don't want a framing excluding community members. Brandy.
Thank you. I was answering Ian's interrogation. I think Bob gave, I like the way that Bob framed it. I thought that sounded good. I think I had a similar assumption that while we could say who can sit on the committee, we certainly can't say who can walk in the room, or as Liz said, watch on BCTV. My weirdness comes with somebody sitting on a committee that's reviewing themselves. So if we're reviewing the police, like if the whole, like, why would the police sit on a committee that's reviewing themselves? That's my cognitive dissonance.
We may be arguing about something that there's no interest in, but it does speak to the point of
well,
a
that might be true. That might be true, but
the larger community involves dispatchers and, people whose partners work for the police.
Yeah, but we're used to making this we're used to making decisions around conflict of interest. We announce our own conflict of interest when we need to. This is not out of our realm.
Sure. Board, how'd you like to move forward? I'd like to
Can I ask Peter to speak on this issue again? I know you shared it sort of on it a little bit, but I'm just, with the further discussion here, I'm just curious if you have any additional thing to add. No?
I don't. I think you've got a policy decision you need to make. You now know that it is legally proper for you to decide either way. You've got some conflicting opinions that you've expressed to each other, and you've heard from the community about it. I'm sorry, I'd like to help you get to the finish line on this one, but I don't think I can.
What do we think about adding in language on this same point that would explicitly state that the committee would not have active police officers on it, but that the committee would make efforts to, communicate with active police officers or to engage them as part of the process in some capacity? So the idea being like that it wouldn't have to be everybody on the committee or something like that. Because I take Bob's point. I do take Bob's point that like they are absolutely a part of this. And so isolating or excluding those voices seems, from the outset, seems irresponsible. But at the same time, I think that I'm kind of surprised that we're ignoring this point that like if there are multiple people in the community who don't want to serve on the committee that's looking at the police because there might be a police officer on there, like I think that's really worth considering.
Liz.
In many of the statements that have been written by myself and by others, we had a phrase that was like, the select board's not going to be on this, the police aren't going to be on this, and somebody else I've forgotten. That must have been taken out.
Yep.
So I think in the last meeting, it was like, let's let the CCCP in because they're good people and they're knowledgeable, right? So that was intentional. We can decide, obviously the select board, we're setting this ball in motion and stepping back.
Yeah.
I think that we can easily say we will not ask appoint policemen to this committee. But we've also, at the same time, making sure that the police are interrogated and examined they are stakeholders. So we can do both things. We can, let's say it, let's call for a motion. And this motion would say, the edit that I made about the interrogating the police, the edit that Ian tweaked about such as, and then the third and hopefully final would be no policemen on the committee. Boom. Let's vote.
No police officers. No police officers.
Yeah. Officers.
Yeah. Thank you, Liz. I guess I like to talk too much.
Let's go, babies. Let's go.
Can I just ask what's the difference between that and knowing that you don't have 3 votes to put a police officer on the committee?
You don't know that you don't have 3 votes. It could go down differently on the night.
But that would jeopardize the entire success of the committee, which none of us want to. We want it to be a successful committee, whereas this is an exclusionary situation.
I bet you that Peter could take the embryo of a motion that I just made and read it to us, and we could vote on it.
No pressure, Peter.
I'm happy to help with that. I think it can help you get to the finish line on that. But before that, I've got to be a stick in the mud to just note for the record, there was one other suggestion made by the community. So you need to decide whether
please do that. Yeah.
You're content with the 3 things that Liz summarized, or if you also want to take action on the suggestion that, again, I'm going to characterize the way I understood it, was adding back in language related to lived experience as advocates and activists to the lived experience language that is already in number 4. And just to be careful about this and not have my understanding or my recitation of my understanding prejudice this, I'd like to read the proposed number 4 in its entirety as it was proposed tonight by the community members.
Ooh.
Is that acceptable to you, or is that more than you need?
I think at this point that's a good idea because we've talked a lot. So if you can, give us the verbiage, yeah.
So it would say, simultaneous with this RFP process, the Select Board will be creating a Community Safety Review Committee made up of a cross-section of Brattleboro area residents. Applications will be solicited, and in its selection of committee members, the Select Board will prioritize the inclusion of people who are part of statistically marginalized communities who also have experience in advocacy and activism towards community safety. This would include Black, Indigenous people of color, those who use drugs, psychiatrically labeled people, people with disabilities, domestic violence and sexual assault survivors, poor people, people who are experiencing or have experienced homelessness, LGBTQ plus folks, and more, while not excluding community members who do not identify with any of these groups. Participation in this committee will be compensated fairly at a rate to be determined by the Select Board.
Okay. Oh no, I can't hear.
Ian.
I don't support that one. So I support 3 and 2, 2 being modified as with the such as language. 1, I really believe is redundant. I think that it talks about tokenism, which I understand, but I really don't believe in restricting the power of the board when it comes to who they select on the committee beyond the major caveat for the police, because I think that it's for all the reasons I've stated. So yeah, I don't support 1. That's where I'm at. So I would actually stand by Liz's sort of amorphic motion version where it was her edit, the 2nd and the 3rd.
Can we ask someone to turn that into real words?
Yeah.
Would that be Peter?
If the board is prepared for me to turn that into a motion, I'm prepared to do that so that one of you can say so moved.
I think we're all headed that way? Yeah? Nods? No? I'm in favor of going that route.
Daniel or Brandy, thoughts?
I think it's hard. It's hard for me, Ian, only because I was with a group that did what you're kind of not, the language that you're not wanting to put in there. I've seen it work successfully in Brattleboro. And so I'm just taking a breath. I'm not saying absolutely no, but I'm taking a breath because I've seen it be really successful.
Yeah.
Can we allow Peter to put it into words and then we take a vote on it?
I don't want to get in your way, Daniel, if you've got an observation you want to make. What I do want to do before we're done is just read the language that would still be in if you don't make the recommended change. I think it's important for you to know what that is.
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead.
Okay.
Please.
So if this proceeds in the manner that Ian described and the other three changes are made separately, but this paragraph 4 isn't changed, then paragraph 4 would read as follows. Simultaneous with this RFP process, the Select Board will be creating a Community Safety Review Committee made up of a cross-section of Brattleboro area residents. Applications will be solicited, and in its selection of committee members, the Select Board will prioritize inclusion of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, as well as other community members who are especially impacted, those who use drugs, psychiatrically labeled people, people with disabilities, domestic violence and sexual assault survivors, poor people, people who are experiencing or have experienced homelessness, LGBTQ plus folks, and more, while not excluding community members who may not identify as part of any traditionally marginalized population. Participation in this committee will be compensated at a rate to be determined by the Select Board.
I'll just say that I think that language is non-divisive at this point.
I'll talk to Brandy and Daniel here. So my thought on this is, for each of those individual groups, right, if we got an applicant from someone from one of those groups, I would look at all of their qualifications. And if they're an activist and they are engaged in these things, that would absolutely weigh on their application to be on the committee. And I don't understand why you would need that additional language. It seems like almost, it's almost like, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? I don't know.
So let me say, I think why this language is in there is because they don't trust us to make the right decision. So they're trying to help us make the right decision. And you can take that, as you will, right? I know that probably is kind of hard, but I think that's where that's coming from. I trust us. I know that you would weigh each applicant on their merits. So.
Great, so let's vote.
Liz. I'll take a vote. Fine by me.
Peter?
I don't know if Ian's ready for a vote. I'm ready for a vote. I don't know if Ian's ready for a vote.
Yeah, I'm.
This is not the work. The work is,
I know,
formation of the committee, choosing a facilitator, and the work of the committee and the facilitator together, and then the report back to us. So we have to launch this. I think that change to me brings it back to a presupposition situation. And I'm also annoyed by the word fair. Why is that in there? Like, we don't need to stick in fair rate.
What?
We're always fair. That's an added piece.
Well, that goes back to trust.
We're not always going to be the board. That's what all of this is about. We're protecting
You're going to be the board
you're
between
gonna be the
now
board
and
here.
December 31st.
Well, I hope
You're
so.
absolutely going to be the board, unless someone steps down. So this is only this process we're talking about.
All right, I'll make the motion.
Thanks, Ian.
Unless
Liz Peter was going to read.
Peter was going to read it.
Peter.
If you'd like, I'll recite it. Ian, I don't want to step on your Tez, if you're ready to recite one, go ahead. But if you'd like me to recite it so you can move it, I'm happy to do that. Okay. So the board will be moving to approve the RFP in the manner that it was presented to you this evening, subject to the following modifications that you're making to it this evening. The first is to add at the end of enumerated paragraph number 1 under process overview, this will include a review of the Brattleboro Police Department's policies, practices, and budget according to national anti-racist criteria. It will also include at paragraph 6, enumerated paragraph 6 of the assumptions of the study section, adding at the end of that sentence, currently the only sentence in that paragraph, adding the words, such as through one-on-one interviews without sharing details publicly, as removal of names in a small community does not sufficiently address anonymity. And adding, and I would ask that you allow me to pick where, because I want to take a more careful look at the flow of this for where it fits in, but somewhere near the end of the assumptions of the study, somewhere in the 8, 9, 10 paragraph area, there will be a new paragraph that will stand alone that will say, no police officers will be appointed to serve as members of the committee.
Thank you, Peter.
Somebody say so moved.
So moved.
Can we talk about it just very briefly? The one bit that I really struggle with is the thing, Liz, where you speak about national anti-racist criteria. Very unclear to me what that is. We're hiring a facilitator that's going to demonstrate good understanding of anti-racist practices. And I think that that's what we're going to get. This national criteria just kind of harks back to a kind of like a specific set of police reforms. And this was a more expansive look at community safety. And so I'm just concerned about that.
Well, as I understand it, Daniel, we're doing 3 things, 3 primary things. We're taking witness, lived experience, appropriate to public safety writ large. And then we're having a conversation with social services writ large. And then we are understanding what the police department does now. And we are understanding it so that we can examine it. And we're completing the promise that we made to the community, which is, based on, the anti-racist policing across the nation and across our history. And we're comparing ourselves to national standards. Now, you mentioned that Campaign Zero was discredited. And actually, when I went to the website, it was 8 Can't Wait was discredited. Campaign Zero is still valid. Do you agree with me on that? Have you looked into that?
Yeah, I mean, so 8 Can't Wait is a thing that Campaign Zero said, oh, hang on, actually, this isn't good enough, right?
Right, yeah.
And there are cities in this country that have adopted those 8 things, and it still doesn't yield the results that it needs.
But they did not dismiss the rest of Campaign Zero.
Right. I just worry that, like, I feel like that language is sort of designed to kind of point us towards a particular outcome.
No, what we have here is Brattleboro has created its own special sauce. And this sauce is,
that's what Brattleboro does.
This sauce is the testimony and the lived experience and the social services and all that. But that has to be on top of what we promised, which was an examination of the police. So yes, it's broader now than Campaign Zero, but we owe the community a conversation about police practices because that's what's urgent in society. So we're going to have, that's the beef. And the social service and the testimony are the sauce on top. So Brattleboro has a special sauce. This is a study that is tailor-made by Brattleboro, for Brattleboro, but we're bringing it back to how does Brattleboro measure up as a police force to our values? And the best way to understand those values in terms of policing is through something like Campaign Zero. So it doesn't take away from what this whole process has been to create this larger picture of public safety. This is a slice of it, of examining the police, seeing how we do on these practices that the community wants to know. Do we have chokeholds? Do we have this? Do we have that? The community wants to know. And then you have the broader conversation about public safety and how the police enter into it. But if you don't do this basic thing, then we're missing our moment, and we're not being responsible to the promise that we made.
Daniel and Liz, is there a small tweak to the language that can make you both happy? Is there?
Can you suggest one?
Well, no, because I don't have it right in front of me. Though it's something that what really bothered you, Daniel? Is it
I don't need the national anti-racist framework. I'm not saying that.
Is there another way to put that,
important.
Liz, that does what you want it to do? I'm sorry to overtalk. Is there somewhere in the middle that you guys can meet? Because this is the last, it feels like the last.
All right, how about if we say Campaign Zero or other appropriate national standards?
No, I'm sorry. I've said all along that I don't want to kind of like name an outcome, and like we're hiring a facilitator that we're going to place a lot of trust in. We're creating a committee that we're going to place a lot of trust in. They're going to drive this. And I don't want them to be driving towards a particular outcome that we've already picked for them.
It's not an outcome, it's a process. If you want to take those words out and just say, as Ian said earlier this evening, take out the word the national anti-racist criteria, then we will have a review of the Brattleboro, examination of the Brattleboro Police Department, their policies, their practices, and their budget.
Yeah.
Is that acceptable,
That's
Daniel?
what I heard you wanted, Daniel.
So the document begins, sorry, I'm looking at it right now. It's a little more expensive than that. This is where I wish we had numbered the paragraphs. So first paragraph in the preamble, it says, the review will examine, but is not limited to, the Brattleboro Police Department, town support for nonprofit organizations, social service agencies, and other community resources, as well as identifying currently unmet community needs. And actually the sentence before that was kind of helpful too. Brattleboro will begin a focused examination of how town resources are currently utilized and can be best utilized to ensure equitable and optimal community health, wellness, and safety. So whoever responds to this RFP is going to know that that's the background, and they, they may well say, hey, here's a framework that I like, and they may bring that in. The committee will do whatever it wants to do with that. I just don't want to name frameworks for them.
Didn't Liz just drop the framework?
Yes, I did. First of all, I think it's very strange to not want to have an understanding of the Brattleboro Police Department against national anti-racist criteria. But if you want to take that out, fine. I think we need, we have this broad understanding of public safety in this study. And everybody's in support of that broad understanding of public safety. But, you know, don't dismiss our prime directive to examine the police department. It's the prime directive.
That's
Ian.
That's why I think it's so important that we name it here. I really agree. Yeah, I think we're kind of going back and forth on a smaller thing. My other, Liz, thank you for remembering. I did one of my sort of friendly amendments was to just strike that. The other would be to say, you know, national anti-racist. What was the last word?
Criteria.
Criteria. National anti-racist criteria as determined by the committee.
I'm fine with that. That's great.
How do you feel about that, Daniel? You know, it puts the power back into the committee, but what it does is it says, like, you know, what's the kind of like general idea of like what we're looking at when we're looking at the Brattleboro Police, its funding, policies, and procedures. We're using a national basis criteria framework, but we're going to let the committee determine what that framework is. It's just another suggestion. I'm just trying to move us forward.
Well, you know, we could call for a vote, but I just don't.
Well,
I think it would be
motion.
entirely irresponsible for us to conduct this work without reviewing the police against the anti-racist criteria. Like, that's what we're here for.
What are the criteria?
To be named by the committee, as Ian just said.
That's one option. The other option
I would take that.
Liz supported was to not use that phrase at all, correct?
Well, Brandy supports that.
I
Ian
actually
supports-
I support either way. I actually like Liz's better without having any criteria in there. It's cleaner. Just saying what the paragraph already said that Daniel read, plus the examination of the police department. I'm just very small paraphrasing. And sentence. I like that better. No offense, Ian.
No.
And then if the committee wants to choose a national criteria, fantastic. I like what Liz just said most recently. Liz, sorry to put that all back on you to remember what you said, but I like that compared with what combined with what Daniel read. So the paragraph Daniel read and the addition that Liz said about an full examination of BPD, blah, blah, all of that.
Okay.
And sentence.
Policies, practices, and budget.
But not pinning it to some national
Correct. I really prefer not to.
We'll
and
let the committee do that. If the committee wants to do that, that's their business.
Yep. With that, I would do it.
Ian made the motion. So Ian, you would have to withdraw that motion and have Peter.
I withdraw the current motion on the table.
Peter.
Peter.
So I'll recite the whole thing over again if you want, but I don't think that's really helpful at this point. The motion that Ian made can be remade with a very small change. I do want to, before calling that out, I want to be really clear just about one quick thing about what your comment just now, Brandy, on Daniel's comment from before.
Okay.
So Daniel cited some language from the preamble that is not part of what's getting changed. And I just want to make sure the record is clear for that. It's relevant to the discussion you just had, but it's not part of what's getting changed. What's getting changed, so you'd be approving the document that was presented to you this evening with the change that I read earlier that was suggested to you by the community members and slightly modified it with the such as language.
Yep.
With the no police officers being appointed to the committee.
Yep.
And with the following language being added to the end of enumerated paragraph 1 of process overview.
Okay.
This will include an examination of the Brattleboro Police Department's policies, practices, and budget, period.
Very good.
Down. I'm down with it.
All right.
Whoa.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion as stated, raise your hand and say aye.
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 Aye. That was weird.
That was weird. Did that work?
Yeah, it did. 5-0. Congratulations.
Peter.
Before you move on to the
Stop
next
it.
item on the agenda, I just, I don't need an action from you. I can go ahead and do this next thing so long as I know that that's your intention in approving this. Embedded in this document is the part about simultaneous with the RFP process, we will seek applicants for the committee. So I just need to know that the board wants that to happen. We'll initiate both of those processes tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
Great.
Do it.
Absolutely.
God damn.
Thank you.
Nods all around. Whew, thank you. That's not the end of any work. That's the beginning.
Hey, Tim,
Yes, Ian.
sorry, just really quickly, I just want to thank the board for taking that time to talk that out. I really appreciate it. I know that we have a lot to do, so let's get to work.
Thank you. And yes, we do have quite a bit of other important work to do. It's a little hard to change gears after that, but it's what
Maybe
we do.
can all take a few breaths.
A little cleansing in and out. New business. First is our financial report. I'm only smiling because I feel like we put Andre through the ringer last time, and he's probably
he liked it.
Yeah,
he's got some great news to share tonight.
Oh, good, Andre.
He had great news last
Stand by.
time too.
Patrick's going to bring up your mic there. There you go.
Okay, so I'm going to try and make this quick because we have places to be. So
We're already here.
Yeah.
And I've bifurcated this conversation into FY20 and FY21. Okay, so FY21, we received the final FY21 payment of local option taxes and have good news to share. As expected, the rooms and meals tax was impacted by COVID and came in $50K below expectations. However, the total sales for the sales tax were $200,000 above expectations. So between those two, we netted $150,000 positive.
That is good news.
Yes. So overall, the FY20 financial results are finalized on September 8th. At this point, outside of some tax collections and vacation accruals, the number should not change, and we will end the year with a small surplus. I don't want to predict the surplus, but all in all, it's a positive.
Fantastic.
So turning to FY21, 1 month into the fiscal year, the general fund, utilities fund, and parking fund are all on track slightly, about 1% below budget for expenditures. We have been approved for a $480,000 loan from the Vermont State Revolving Fund for water treatment plant projects. The terms are amazing. There's zero interest, and then we won't need to begin repayment for 5 years. So it's like free money. I mean, this is like my finance interpretation of this thing. Free money. Historic, and then this is more an operational issue. But historically, the finance department has processed payroll via paper and through the mail. We have created an e-pay stub process and are encouraging town employees to sign up for a greener and more secure payroll process that reduces administrative costs. Does anyone have any questions?
It feels
No,
a little
thank you
bit
for that.
surreal, doesn't it? It feels
Well, I'm very
surreal.
positive, but things are very positive, so it's easier to tell the story.
So does anybody have any advice? Is this the moment where I start to gloat about the 1% local option sales tax?
Don't jinx this.
I had a conversation with a community member today that was not interested in hearing that side, but we're glad to have the revenue.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, the
I
important
wasn't
piece
here when we made that decision, but the tax collections are way up versus whatever we expected them to be when we made that decision.
It's so weird.
before the
Internet.
before the headline becomes, Wessel praises taxes. The point I was making there is that embedded within the 1% local option sales tax is taxation on places like Amazon. So the use of Amazon and other from away companies is impacting our town in the positive, which is very unique to this mechanism we're using. Liz?
I was just going to say that your foresight for imagining internet sales during a pandemic is quite striking.
Who knew?
Yes. Unfortunately, that doesn't reflect itself in any personal investments whatsoever. So, whatever. Anyway, Andre, thank you for the good news. We don't want to talk about it much because we don't want to, change our luck, right? Board members? Do you have, board members have any other specific questions for Andre? Great, I guess his head shakes. I think you're off the hook. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Again, we don't take a vote for that financial report. We just smile and wave, and we move on to item B, which is going to be a very interesting discussion if Sue is still with us, concerning Agricultural Advisory Committee. A very important discussion, I think, going forward. Sue, are you here?
Is, I believe.
There's Sue.
Oh my gosh, you kind of faded up.
Yeah, it was
great.
cool.
I really appreciated that.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Sue.
So I'm here, and Stephen Dotson, the Sustainability Coordinator, is also going to speak to you briefly. But since Stephen has come on board, we've had the extra capacity to really tackle the Agricultural Advisory Committee, which had kind of dwindled over the years. And part of that was the committee was a committee of 12. And I think there's probably some historical reasons for that I laid out in the memo to you. But over the years, we just, we've had people express interest. We've had a couple of members on, but we've never really been able to get 7 members to have a quorum for a 12-member committee. And so through work with Stephen, we've kind of been able to think about ways that we can reinvigorate this committee. And so we're coming to you tonight to ask you to shrink the size of the committee, also from 12 to 7, to also appoint 3 ex officio members. And I will let Stephen talk to that because that was his idea based on conversations he's had out in the community. And then also we'd like to update the charge of the committee. It was created in the 1980s, and it was really a time when, our farmlands were under threat from development. A lot of the commercial up on Putney Road was kind of beginning to spread, and there was fear of large housing developments, I think, on the farmland as well. I think the needs of our agricultural community have changed a bit at this time, and so we want to figure out ways and have as part of the charge to kind of work on creating a sustainable local food system or more resilient food system. So that would be added to the other.
Kind of.
I think Andre, you might be off off microphone.
Can you mute Andre, please? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so we're looking to expand the charge a little bit to create a resilient local food system. And the Agricultural Committee has always they've done work in that in supporting the farmers market and whatnot over the years. And then there's two key points that I wanted to identify that I think we could hit the ground running with the committee. And that is, there's two programs that the town has that are probably due for some review. And the first is the Agricultural Land Protection Revolving Loan Fund. And so this was established by representative town meeting in the mid-1980s. And it provides money, low interest loans for the purchase of agricultural land. It has not been used in, I think it's around 30 years. In 2014, some of the money was taken to create the Energy Efficiency Fund, but there is still about $51,000 in that fund. We've had some conversations with the agricultural community over the years, and it seems that their needs have changed. There are still needs for them, maybe something along infrastructure for their farms or some compatible industries like a slaughterhouse or something like that that maybe could take advantage of that loan fund. So we'd really like the Agricultural Committee to take a look at the purpose of those funds and what are the needs for a farming community. And then the other is the Farmland Tax Stabilization Program. It was updated in 2014, but there were some outstanding questions at that time. So it would be a good area for the committee to take a look at and make some recommendations to the select board moving forward with that program. And I'm going to ask that Stephen be unmuted and he can talk a little bit about the work that he's discussed with some people about the food system.
Hello, Select Board.
Great. Stephen, hello.
Good evening. So, it's been an exciting 6 months working in the midst of this whole situation, and I'll be giving you all a more in-depth update in September, and I look forward to that. But I think one thing that we all have realized is that food insecurity has quadrupled throughout Vermont, and part of what this effort is just to recognize that there's a need to try and build a bridge between the citizen bodies that are discussing this, that are populated by the farmers traditionally, but also integrate that into the larger coordinated food system and take a systemic approach to building a local regional food system that supports our farmers, our distributors, our restaurants, and even gives people the opportunity to give up some of their own produce to soup kitchens and things and the rest. So the format here that people were inviting into with these ex officio seats is really meant to provide an ongoing link for this citizen body that has voting power, these 7, to be in constant relationship with Strolling of the Heifers, with Food Connects, with Retreat Farm, with Food Works, with the farmers market, with the co-op. Who that is in those seats, I don't think necessarily matters so much as we're taking that broader coordination approach. So that's where we're coming from, that from this angle. There's a number of people who've stepped forward in the community that have some very valuable insight or experience, whether they are people connected to Wyndham Grows and the kind of food business entrepreneur ecosystem, or people with experience in doing regional food systems planning. So I know some of them have been are trying to attend here, and I know you all have accepted some applications with some interest. So I would just say there's energy there and people stepping up in some really exciting ways. So we want to try and unleash that.
Thanks, Stephen. Are we coming back to Sue for any questions or?
Yeah, so I'd invite you to, if you have any questions, Stephen and I can answer them.
Okay, I wasn't sure. Ian has a hand up.
Yeah, so this is cool and exciting. I'm curious, I don't know, Sue or Stephen, who would answer this, but do you have any other examples of ex officio roles used in other committees in Brattleboro? I found this to be kind of unique, and I'm just kind of curious if we've used it before or if this is a new thing.
I can tell you I'm an ex officio member of the Downtown Brattleboro Alliance. So that is a board that has both the chamber and a town representative on it to kind of make those links and keep in close communication. I am not aware of any town boards or committees. I can't think of any off the top of my head. None of the ones that we staff in our department.
Yeah, I'm also not aware of another example of that in Brattleboro, but it's a pretty commonly used tool, more broadly in government committees to bring in the kind of expertise that Stephen spoke about.
And just to be clear, sorry, this is Stephen. Just to be clear, they would not have voting power, nor would they be necessary to reach quorum. And quorum has been the obstacle for this committee to even gather. Being populated by farmers, you can only imagine the schedules that they have to keep. And so with 12 people, it was nearly impossible to even get them together. So in my mind, because it's a public meeting, anyone could come. This ensures that we maintain certain relationships to this broader vision of our food system and keep things from getting too siloed, keep a space at the table.
Thank you. That's really interesting.
Liz?
Well, so we asked Stephen when we hired him to think outside the box, and this ex officio is it. It sounds like an excellent plan all around, and I support it.
Me too. Just for clarity, though, 7 members with 3 being ex officio. What is quorum then in that situation?
4.
4, because it'll be 7 voting members, and then plus 3 more as ex officio.
Oh, I'm sorry. The 3 is on top of the 7. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, I guess I read that wrong when I looked over the motion.
Remember earlier when we were gloating about the Wessel 1% sales tax? I was
not gloating. I was looking for permission.
What having somebody in a position to really take a deep dive into sustainability matters has yielded thus far. So thank you.
We did not give Tim permission to gloat, so.
He took a little gloat, so I'm taking one.
What's good for the goose is good for the gander.
That's very true.
Not going to take that bait, but thank you, Daniel. Yellow cardinal. I did have another question. I'm totally distracted now.
I'm sorry. I think it's a really good idea, and I love it, and I love the memo. I was super fascinated by the memo.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, certainly the quadrupling is actually a figure I had not heard. That's even worse than I thought food insecurity had gotten in the more recent time period. I think my question had to do with, do you anticipate any kind of problems with our lovely situation with our relationship with the state and any kind of state laws that might prohibit, local food systems? Is this something that at a state level we're being encouraged to do on a local level? There are state partners to help us look for solutions. I'm just curious if you had a comment about that. Always being cognizant of Dylan's rule.
I don't see any barriers from the state. In fact, there were some initiatives, actually, though it might not have come from the state a couple of years ago, the Farm to Plate program, where they were encouraging a lot of this work. They had done some studies and produced some guides. So, I think that strengthening our farms and having local food resilience, I think is something they'd support. I mean, even with the Everyone Eats program that's going on right now, I mean, the state is, that's the program where community members can get a free meal from 4 to 6 down at 80 Flat Street, Monday through Thursday. The state is trying to put their dollars into the local economy. So it's, there are producers in town who are supplying the food to the restaurants who, to make that happen. So I don't think that there are barriers from the state level.
Okay. Yeah, I had in my brain sort of regulatory requirements of food safety and things like that. But
and I think the fact that this is not this committee is not established under statute, but was established locally back in the 80s, and so now is being modified locally. It addresses a need we are empowered to address locally without it being encumbered by mandated state processes.
Great. And my other question was just probably simple. The Agricultural Land Protection Revolving Loan Fund comes off the tongue easily. It looks like it was tapped just a few short years ago. So was the other balance in the $100,000 range and it was brought down to the $50,000 range?
Yeah, I think at the time it was around 95,000. And I think that the proposal that came from the select board was actually to move all of the funding out of it. And it was amended at representative town meeting. The members wanted to leave, I think they allowed the interest to be moved.
Okay.
And the money that was moved became the funding for the energy audits that we've been implementing over these last few years for town energy efficiency in town buildings.
Oh, okay. Like the Honeywell project?
No, after the Honeywell, but the more recent energy audits that we've been back doing things like the pellet boilers at a couple of locations and windows at the library and those things.
Okay, terrific. Awesome.
Which is part of the the largest spending examination of sustainability that the town has been conducting for years.
All good work. And we're glad to.
We're all looking at Daniel to make a comment.
I was getting misty-eyed about the energy audits. I remember reading those many a time.
Good old days.
Oh yeah, simpler times.
Great. Well, unless anyone has any, I wanted to just shout out, I apologize. Looks like one community member has a hand up still, but I have a feeling that was still from our previous discussion. So if it's not, just take your hand away for a moment and put it back up and I'll know for sure, because it might've been somebody who walked away from their computer. Does anybody have any further comments or questions for our folks here? No? We have a fairly complicated motion.
More complicated than the last one?
No. But you're off the hook, Ian.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion.
Go ahead, Liz.
I move to reconstitute the Agricultural Advisory Committee to, number 1, include 7 members with 2-year terms, staggered with 3 members terminating in 2021 for the startup year, and 4 members terminating in 2022. And number 2, to add 3 non-voting ex officio members from the community organizations with expertise and or influence in food systems. And number 3, adopt the revised charge as presented.
Thanks, Liz.
Welcome.
Since I could tell that everyone was paying very close attention to Liz, I'm gonna say, as Liz has stated, she has made a motion to reconstitute the Agricultural Advisory Committee. as spoken. All those in favor, please say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
That's 5-0 with no opposed. Thank you, Sue. And we also have, you're going to be speaking to our local hazard mitigation plan.
I am.
Go right ahead.
All right, so Brattleboro has a hazard mitigation plan. It's a plan that basically is trying to reduce the risks to people and property and costs that we have in recovering from a disaster. It's a plan that is, we're part of FEMA's CRS community rating system, and so we are required as part of the CRS. And it basically what we do is we identify the hazards, and then we identify appropriate mitigation actions that we can take that we might want to do. And oftentimes we use it to apply for federal funds if they're available. And so our plan was adopted in 2016. It expires in February of 2021. And we are about to set upon reviewing it and updating it. We had a really solid plan. We view it mostly as updating. There's been a lot of work that's gone on in the past couple of years, whether it's some buyouts, work at 250 Burge Street, the EPA's work that they had done on resiliency. So there's updates like that. We want to be a little bit more explicit about climate change and social justice issues. They were definitely in there, but we want to call them out more specifically. And in order to do this work, we want to expand the existing hazard mitigation committee to include some additional stakeholders. Those include a select board member we'd like to have, a liaison from the Planning Commission, and at least 2 community representatives who can work with us. Basically, the way we view the committee over the next couple of months is they'll help us rank the projects, bring projects into the plan, and just kind of be a sounding board for the outreach that we'll be doing. So yeah, basically we're looking to expand that committee. And then the idea is that maybe after this project is done, they'll meet a couple of times to help facilitate this project. And then probably we'll meet annually to kind of go over progress and you know, just check out where we are with the plan. So I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you. I'm very distracted because my printer just started printing something. So I hope that's my wife doing that. Otherwise, I don't know if I should go over and read it. Board members, questions, comments? I think it's really great to put extra attention to some folks in places like Tribe Park. You know, historically, nationally, poor people live in these places where hazard mitigation is most important. So I think that's great to add that language and inclusion. Anybody else? No? Okay.
Ian has his hand up.
You should just.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Ian.
Oh man, sorry about that.
I am respecting the procedure.
I think. Oh, never mind. I won't explain why that happened. Go ahead, Ian.
It's okay.
No, it's because you're next to the interpreter, and sometimes I see that movement, and I don't see the important board member movement of hands. Go ahead.
So when are the people appointed to this committee, or to this committee? Not the right word. So like a select board member, people from the. Sorry, go ahead.
No, so I believe that the process is they would have to be warned for the openings. And then I think it has to be out there for 15 days. So I guess ideally we'd be looking for September. I guess it would be the second meeting in September. Brian Bannon and I, have been brainstorming some community membership to try to, get some interest from community members.
And is there been any brainstorming on how it's going to be advertised for people if they want to apply? That's misunderstanding or something, or?
No, there's just, if you want us to do any kind of special outreach, you should specify that in the motion. Otherwise, there's a news release that goes out. It's posted on the town's website. It's made available to the public, but we don't go out actively seeking individuals to apply.
Okay. I'm clearly new to this, so I'm just asking about it.
Well, they're both sort of new things, so we could certainly see what the response is and then kick our own advocacy and talking it up into high gear if we need to.
That's what usually generates interest in applications, is just the awareness in the community that there are these opportunities. It's one of the reasons why you announce, have a standing policy of announcing the openings as you will at the end of this meeting.
Cool. Yeah, I think then, I guess we should put it on ourselves to make sure that we get this stuff out there, because it's very important. So.
And I just want to make one point on the committee membership. It's one of those that's pretty heavy with department members, but that is because that is a FEMA requirement. So, it kind of modeled this after the traffic safety, but this one's really department heavy because it's a requirement.
Absolutely, thank you. Would anyone like to make a motion? Brandy? Oop, can't hear you. You forgot you didn't have your headset on.
I was enjoying not having things in my ears for a minute. Okay. So I would move to revise the Hazard Mitigation Committee as follows. 1, to include the following staff members or their designees: the police chief, fire chief, director of public works, planning director, zoning administrator, and town manager. And 2, to add a select board member, a 1-year term, select board appointed planning commission representative, 1-year term, and 2 select board appointed community representatives, 2-year terms, with 1 expiring in odd years and 1 expiring in even years.
Thanks, Brandy. I won't go the lazy route this time. Brandy has made a motion to revise the Hazard Mitigation Committee as follows, to include the following staff members or their designees: the police chief, fire chief, director of public works, planning director, zoning administrator, and town manager. And 2, to add a select board member, 1-year term, select board appointed planning commission representative, 1-year term, and 2 select board appointed community representatives for 2 years terms, with 1 expiring in odd years and 1 expiring in even years. After all that, all those in favor, please raise your hand, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
That's 5-0 with none opposed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sue.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's keep going with some paving bids. While Steve gets to us, I think Steve Barrett is going to be joining us. I do want to call out that I have promised our ASL interpreters a break at 10 p.m. as well as the traditional 8 p.m. break. So we're going to see how that goes. I didn't think we'd get to this point, but here we are. Steve, hello.
Good evening. So I'm here to talk about paving. We put out 2 bids for the annual paving this summer, or actually the paving will be completed in the fall by October. So we did 2 contracts. Contract 1 is to pave Meadowbrook Road, New England Drive, and Heinsberg Road. And the bids range from $191,524 to $236,258. There was 5 bidders. And what we're recommending is the low bid. The low bid was by All States Asphalt from Sunderland, Mass. for a total of $191,524.60. So that's the first bid. And I don't know if we're just going to, I can read both of these off and you can accept both of them.
I think that'd be fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the second bid is, the reason we did two bids is because the second bid incorporates some of the smaller streets, Chestnut Hill, Acorn Lane, the Preston parking lot, and the police department driveway. So those are a little bit more specialized because they're smaller. So again, we put out bids. They range from a low of $62,080 to $109,680. We advertised this project and there was an addendum. It looked like there was a mathematical error for the Preston lot as far as the tonnage. The tonnage is the amount of asphalt that's used to actually to pave. So within that, we sent out the addendums to all the vendors, and Arlington Paving did not include the addendum, but if they had, we used their tonnage amount, they would have actually been next to the lowest bid. So what we're requesting is to accept DMI Paving from Brattleboro as the low bid for $76,890. And that's all I got.
Okay. Do a lot of work with DMI. Have we worked together with all states?
We've worked with all the vendors here. They're all local. Even, there's some from Massachusetts and in Brattleboro. We've worked with all these vendors and they're all good. So we're comfortable with all of them.
Great. Board member questions?
Slightly unrelated question, but it is about paving. This is all great. And I drove up Meadowbrook Road the other day. I was like, oh, this road's in rough shape. So I'm glad to see that that's going to get done. I think I remember like the other year that there's like a list of projects and, things rise to the top in terms of how good or poor condition the road is in. Is that accurate? Is that what I remembered?
The list is it's a moving list, and
Yes.
There's different paving applications. So like, for instance, you could have gone up to Meadowbrook Road and it may have been cracking and falling, and then go to another street where it's falling apart with potholes. So the method of paving that we use, in some cases, it's better, it's more efficient and cost effective for the town to overlay. A lot of these projects are going to put a 2-inch overlay mat over an existing road that's not completely gone, but it will give it a nice life of, additional 10, 15 years. In some cases, some of these smaller streets are doing, Chestnut Hill, those probably won't be done for 30 years from now. So there's different methods depending on how poor the road is. And we do crack sealing, or we mill roads out and grind them up and start over. So the list is always greater than the funding that we receive. On average, when we pave a road, we don't go back for 30 years. So that tells you quite a bit.
I feel like roads are like a thing that people want to talk about all the time. They want to talk about roads, taxes,
parking,
parking, and social justice. And, so I think I've heard you say this before, that the work exceeds the money that's allocated in the budget. If town meeting had other thoughts about it, that could change, right? If the town meeting members wanted to increase the budget by some number of dollars, that could get more paving done.
Yeah, and that's happened.
That's how it works, right?
But it's also a balance. So this board here, you approved a capital budget for us, but that's in harmony with the rest of the services that, we pay for as taxes in town. So, we have to, Public Works paving is one piece of that large capital plan. So we try to maintain a nice consistent amount of funding. We do receive some funding from the state. Just a few meetings ago, I came to you. We normally receive about $230,000 from the state for paving. And also they pave some of the streets in town that are Class 1 roadways. So it's kind of a balance. You always could use more. it's a struggle. And normally people don't really, the roads seem pretty smooth right now, but as you all know, when springtime comes, that shows how poor the conditions of the roadway actually are, because we patch them throughout the year. And, you know, the ugly head comes out in the springtime because the water gets in there and it freezes and all the potholes appear. And what that's indicating is how poor the road is. But in the summertime, you know, you don't feel it. So, you know, it goes away. It comes back every spring, though. That's our little public works nightmare.
Thanks, Steve.
Paving is also one of the more expensive recurring capital things that we do, right? So when we deal with a building generationally, that's a different story. But as far as the work that we have to do year after year just to keep the community in good shape, paving is one of the most expensive things we do. So it's a challenge. What you say is very true, that this could be made a higher priority, either at select board level or at town meeting level. But to stretch that out to make a really noticeable difference and get a lot more road miles paved, we're spending about $500,000 a year between the state's money and the town's money to get done what we're getting done. And as Steve pointed out, that's a 30-year cycle. So it gives you a frame of reference for just how much more money would be needed to really make a noticeable difference here. With the limited funds that we can make available for this, we keep at the higher priority roads every year.
That's very similar to the conversations, the difficult conversations we have around sidewalk repair too, you know, and that keeping that balance between people who need to use the sidewalks and people who want to use their cars and all that. It's complex, but that's the job, right, everyone?
Mm-hmm. Who's got the cricket in their house?
I think it's got to be Steve. I'm going with Steve.
I think so.
I have the door open and the cricket.
Oh, yes.
All right, just going away.
I thought maybe you had something stuck under the desk there.
Well, you know, when I started, it was light.
Fair enough.
All right.
You hear that?
Duly noted. I'm ready for a motion.
Wait a minute. I'm afraid.
Oh, what?
We can't do that because I see a new hand and it's Gary Stroud. Would Gary like to chime in on this particular subject? Paving?
My video.
Gary?
Hey, hi. How's everybody tonight? Good? Awesome.
Hi, Gary.
Good. Do you have a quick comment about?
Quick question just for Steve, and I'm gonna let you guys move on because I gotta finish my third round of coffee. But Steve, that hill that's going down on Elm Street, I guess we mentioned it at the last meeting when we were at the high school. That slowly is that anywhere on that list of repairs? Because I know during the winter, I mean, it's very difficult even for me with the disability of other people, with my walking into potholes and stuff, and also coming around, I guess, up on Canal Street from where Code 3 is at, that long strip of sidewalk, as far as anywhere on that repair list. And also I noticed downtown, you're right too, there are a few potholes, but that's going to be taken care of. But I was just wondering, that's the main one going down that hill, because that's a main thoroughfare. And I was going to also call up the transit center about the bus stand up there by Gouges as well too, because during the wee winters and that being taken care of as well too. So I was just trying to get a feedback on you what the progress was on that.
Yeah, so a couple things here. The sidewalks, we just did a complete survey of all the sidewalks in town. And then we're putting together a list. And again, that's a challenge. You know, we have approximately $70,000 a year, and then plus in our regular budget, we make repairs. So as Elm Street, as far as the sidewalk goes, there'd probably be some patching there. As far as the roadway goes, that's not in the near future, but it's also eligible for special funding from the state if we can get that. So we would include it. And then there is a section on Canal Street that we have our eye on Hospital Hill. That's pretty challenging. So we do have a list, and we're going out and we're looking at all these sidewalks, and we're addressing what we can. But if anybody has a particular area or a hazard, we get a lot of good feedback from the public. They'll call us. If there's a trip hazard or if there's something that's a challenge for somebody, let us know, and then we'll do a work order. We will go out and investigate it and do our best to try to take care of those spots. We call them spot checks. So maybe we don't do the whole neighborhood, but we'll fix any places that are in real bad disrepair, you know, to prevent tripping hazards and things of that nature.
Awesome. Yeah, 'cause I was just monitoring that hill there. It's been really a challenge for me because of it's getting deeper and deeper and the hole's getting bigger and bigger by that bridge when you're going down Elm Street from Hoosiers. I don't know if you guys noticed that, that particular spot. And I'm thinking without the winters coming up, the frost heaves and then the ice and the challenges with that, along where Code 3 and Napa's at that, also there, the potholes that are in that sidewalk. So I guess you said you could basically put in a work order, I guess, through your...
Yeah, we'll check out those areas. I know what you're talking about in the area of the Elm Street Bridge where there's kind of a washout next to the abutment.
Yes.
Where people had been traveling up and down and it kind of wore next to the abutment.
Yes.
Yes, so we're aware of that, and then we'll look at Code 3.
Awesome. Awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, guys. And guys, stay safe, and we'll see you again.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you. Gary. Thank you. And just a reminder that there's a Traffic Safety Committee meeting at 8 a.m. on Thursday, correct, Daniel? Right?
Sir.
Traffic safety on Thursday, right?
Yes, sir.
It's another way for people to give input for any kind of safety spots. Did I wake you?
Form on the town. No.
Okay.
Didn't you hear me say it first?
So a promise is a promise. I think we should take a short break for our ASL interpreters. They've asked me to do this at 10, if that's okay.
Vote on these bids.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes, of course, right after our vote, of course, which I can't do. Who would like to make a motion?
I was excited to make it. If nobody else minds. Okay, two motions. Motion number 1, to award the bid for summer paving project number 1 to All States Asphalt Incorporated in the total amount of $191,524,060. Can I do the second one as well?
Yes, please.
Okay, good. Move to award the bid for summer paving project number 2 to DMI Paving in the total of $76,890.
Thanks, Daniel. Daniel has made a motion to award the bid for summer paving project number 1 to All States Asphalt Inc. in the total amount of $191,524.60, and to award the bid for summer paving project number 2 to DMI Paving in the amount of $76,890 even. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And that's 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, I just thought we should take a break just so we don't feel like we're rushing through the next item. Is that okay with folks?
You mean rushing through the last item?
Well, there's 2 more items.
The break is for the interpreters.
It is.
Really, right?
It is. And they deserve it. So
yeah.
Let's take a break until 10:15, and we'll be right back with more exciting business. What are we doing now? We have new business. Peter's going to tell us about a ratification of a decision that he's already made.
Yes, so normally we come to you and we ask for permission to apply for grants and then come back to you when the grant has been awarded to accept and appropriate the grant. In this case, this is one of those formula grants where occasionally, sometimes it's annually, sometimes it's a little more often. With the JAG grants, it happens a couple of times a year. We get notified of money that the town is eligible to receive, and what we have to do is file application paperwork just to fulfill the process, to the paperwork obligation in order to be able to receive the money that's been set aside in our name. The JAG grant comes, it's funding from the federal government, from the Department of Justice to police departments, and it can be used for a variety of purposes. It has been used for a variety of purposes here over the years, sometimes for training, sometimes for equipment, sometimes for other purposes. What we specifically intend to use this $11,614 for is the implementation of training that will be consistent with either recommendations that may come out of our own local process or recommendations that may come down from the national and federal review of the various aspects of policing and racial equity and social equity that are part of all of this that's going on here and all around us. And so if we had not applied prior to this meeting, we would have foregone this $11,614. And I didn't want to miss that opportunity. And I'm also, conscious of the concerns about reprioritizing how money like this can be spent or is spent, and other reprioritizing that may come out of the work that the committee and the facilitator will do. So in that context, Chief Fitzgerald recommended and I approved that we apply for the money as usual and that we specifically identify the purpose for these funds to be training around racial equity and social equity for the police department. So if you are comfortable with that, then it would be appropriate for you to take a motion here in a moment to ratify my decision, and we'll go ahead and receive these federal funds and use them for that purpose. If you have a question or a concern, now would be the time to raise it.
Okay. Anyone have a question or concern? I would think that, I was just filling time. Ian, go ahead.
Peter, did you speak to, and I may have missed it in either the memo or what you just said, and I apologize if I did,
okay.
why we're ratifying it and we're not just making the decision?
Yes. So if we had more advance notice, sometimes we get more advance notice, sometimes we don't, particularly these formulaic ones, right? Every now and then there is a ratification of a grant application that comes to you because we learned about something late and needed to act quickly. And so I authorize it, and then we come and explain ourselves and ask for you to ratify my decision. This one wasn't like that. This one we got very short notice when we received it. And so I believe it was just about the time of the last meeting. There was no time to put anything together for the last meeting, and the deadline was before this meeting. And so I authorized that we go ahead and apply and come to you tonight to ask for ratification.
Okay, I thank you for elaborating on that.
Sure.
Liz.
Well, I think this meeting, some parts of this meeting have a theme, and it's called free money.
And also committees.
That is not what I thought you were going to say.
Yeah. I was going to say something more serious. No, no, I think I
think free money is very serious.
Absolutely. I was going to say something like this is a perfect example of something a committee's guidance on might be, we could use this as an example. Here's this fairly small amount of money in this case, but it can be spent in various ways through the police department. How should we as a community be spending money such as this? Just a concrete example. All right. Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thanks, Liz.
I move to ratify Town Manager Elwell's decision to apply for an Edward J. Byrne 2020 JAG grant funded by the Department of Justice in the amount of $11,614.
Liz has made a motion to ratify Town Manager Elwell's decision to apply for an Edward J. Byrne 2020 JAG grant funded by the Department of Justice in the amount of $11,614. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And that's 5-0.
Oh, I was going to ask, what does JAG stand for?
I asked the same question before. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Justice Assistance Grant.
Justice Assistance.
No justice assistance grant, no peace.
Something like that.
The reggae version.
Getting late, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Punchy sets in around this time. Our last duties is to announce committee vacancies, which our town manager always offers to read for us, but someone else could do it too.
I'm happy to do it. One of us should quickly.
Go right ahead, Peter.
So the current vacancies, including those that have that reflect the actions you have taken this evening, are the Agricultural Advisory Board, where there are vacancies for 7 community members, and there are the 3 ex officio positions that will also be filled per the discussion earlier this evening. 1 vacancy on the ADA Advisory Board, 4 vacancies on the Town Arts Committee, 3 vacancies on the Conservation Commission, 1 vacancy on the Development Review Board, 3 vacant alternate positions on the Development Review Board, 1 vacancy on the Energy Committee. On the Hazard Mitigation Committee, there's a select board vacancy that you will choose among yourselves when these come back to you for appointment. 1 Planning Commission member to be appointed at that time also, and then 2 community member positions that are vacant and we will be soliciting applications for. The one vacancy in the position of Inspector of Lumber, Shingles, and Wood. 1 or 2, because you can appoint either 1 or 2 at your discretion, town representatives to the Senior Solutions Advisory Board. I'm sorry, Advisory Council, Senior Solutions Advisory Council. And as yet undetermined number of vacancies to create and populate the Community Safety Review Committee. We'll push all this information out in the normal manners, as well as doing a news release specifically about the Community Safety Review Committee, and per your discussion earlier this evening, also about the Hazard Mitigation Committee.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
And I'll call everybody's attention to the monthly department reports, which are always attached and findable on the website. Some very interesting stuff, including very involved and extensive police reports of incidents and stuff like that, if you're into that kind of thing. Any other business, board members?
I've got no.
No, you don't.
Let's adjourn. I move to adjourn.
Thank you. Daniel has moved to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
5-0, non-controversial. Thank you to everybody. Oh, hi, Chris.